Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto Kurama mode Chunin exams NaruHina. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by BLEIS29, link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto. It was a beautiful day in the land of fire. The sun was shining brightly in the deep blue sky, with only a few fluffy white clouds floating here and there. And it was during this beautiful day that two people were traveling on the road, heading towards the north, out of the country. The oldest of the two travelers was a tall man, with a mane of unruly and spiky white hair, tied in a long ponytail, and kept on the front by a horned Hittite made of steel, and engraved with the kanji for oiled dot. His attire consisted of a green kimono and matching pants, tied by a black belt, with a mesh shirt underneath, a red haori with two yellow circles on each side, traditional red jeta, arm guards and a huge scroll that he was carrying on his back. On his face were red markings running down his eyes and a wart on the left side of his nose. The youngest and, by a large margin, shortest traveler was a 13-year-old blonde boy with bright blue eyes, 3 whiskers marks on each cheek, and a deficient fashion sense, as he was wearing a bright orange and blue jumpsuit with a white collar, a white swirl on his left arm, and a red whirlpool insignia on his back, orange pants with a shuriken holster and bandages on his right leg, and blue sandals. Said boy, whose name was Uzumaki Naruto, was currently babbling about and pestering his traveling companion, Jiraiya of the Sannin, Toad Sage of the legendary Mount Mamboku and self-proclaimed super pervert, for a training session. Currently, the two shinobi were on a 2.5 years long training trip and they have been on the road for about a week. And, beside walking and camping, they still did nothing. Which was annoying Naruto greatly, resulting in the current situation. Damn it, Hiro Sennin. Teach me a jutsu. It's been a whole week and you still didn't teach me anything. I want to train, you know. Said Hiro Sennin didn't hear his students' angry demands, as he was deep in thought. One of the reasons Jiraiya took Naruto on this training trip was to help him controlling the power of the beast sealed inside of him. Naruto was indeed a Jinchuriki, a human containing a bijk, a living and conscious mass of chakra of immense power. The blonde boy was the container of the most powerful of them all, the Kyuubi, and because of it he was being hunted by a group of mercenary with unknown motives, composed of dangerous S-rank Nukenin, the Akatsuki. If Naruto was able to use the power of the Kyuubi, he would be able to defend himself with more ease. And thus, Jiraiya, who was the keeper of the key opening the seal that kept the Kyuubi in check, was wondering if, perhaps, opening said seal would make the control of the bijk easier for his blonde student. The risks were high. The little chakra he had felt during the month the Toad Sage trained Naruto before the finals of the Chunin exams had told him a lot. The beast's chakra was powerful, extremely so, but it also diffused a sinister feeling and a lot of killing intent in the air, which he suspected was the fox's influence. Too much chakra and Naruto would probably lose control and become a rampaging berserker. But Jiraiya was confident in his student's ability to keep the Kyuubi in check. If he opened the seal a bit, the boy may not be the brightest, but he had an unbreakable will. Coming to a decision, Jiraiya stopped and turned towards Naruto. The boy, thinking that his master finally submitted to his not well-thought argument for teaching him something cool, immediately forgot his angry mood and brightened instantaneously. Finally. You're going to teach me a Kikijutsu? I'll have it down in no time, Hiro Sennin, believe it. Naruto exclaimed while raising his fist with determination. Yes, I'm going to teach you something. Said Jiraiya, but it's not a jutsu. Huh? Then what is it? A new cool taijutsu move? Asked the boy with curiosity. Nope. Not that either. I'm going to teach you how to control the chakra of the Kyuubi. Naruto's face turned to confused to somewhat fearful. He had used the chakra of the beast sealed inside of him several times and, while he had felt the power flowing through his body, he also felt the demonic presence that was it carried, the presence that brought out his darkest emotions, urged him to kill his opponent and increased his animal impulses. He had always managed to keep his control over the Kyuubi, but it had been sometimes difficult, particularly during his fight against Sasuke at the Valley of the End. Trying to hide his nervousness behind a mask of confidence, Naruto flashed a big, toothy, but somewhat uneasy, smile. How are you sure? I don't really need it, you know. I'm plenty strong by myself. Jiraiya was not fooled by his student's act. It was true that Naruto had a huge potential, but not using the Kyuubi was a huge waste. Besides, even with the most rigorous training in the world, 2.5 years were not enough for Naruto to become strong enough to defend himself against the Akatsuki. He needed this power. I know you're scared at this remark, the blonde knucklehead's mask fell and he looked down, but I have faith in you. And I'm not the only one. The Yondaime Hokage too had faith in you when he sealed the Kyuubi inside of you. Jiraiya said to Naruto. At the mention of his hero, the blonde genin looked up to meet the sage's confident grin. Besides, if you learn to control the fox's chakra, you will most likely be able to resist its influence easily. And a perverted smile crept its way on Jiraiya's face. Imagine all the girls you could get when you'll boast about how you can control a demon's power. You'll have your own harem. Naruto's eyebrows started to twitch violently and a vein was starting to pulse on his forehead. "Stop daydreaming, you perv," he yelled at his giggling master. Jiraiya got his perviness under control, wiped his bleeding nose, and put on a serious face, in stark contrast with the one he had earlier. "It won't be easy, and with your current strength you probably won't be able to use a large amount of demonic chakra, but this training will eventually make you extremely powerful. You may even surpass the Yondaime if you manage to survive it one day," Jiraiya encouraged Naruto. The sage's boasting was all it took to erase Naruto's doubts and fears. With a renewed determination, the blonde genin stood straight and stared straight into his teacher's eyes. "I'll do it," he proclaimed loudly. "I will control the Kyuubi's chakra, and I will become strong enough to protect all my precious people and to bring Sasuke back. And then I will become Hokage. Believe it." Jiraiya smiled proudly at his student's proclamation. If there was one thing that Jiraiya liked, beside pretty women, it was people who had guts, and Naruto was truly a gutsy shinobi. Just like Minato and Kushina, the Toad Sage thought. But he couldn't tell Naruto about them. Not yet. It pained him to keep the boy's parentage from him, but his father had a lot of enemies that would like nothing more than to make sure that his line end for good. It was better to keep them in the dark, and given Naruto's loud mouth and light head, he didn't trust him to keep it a secret, he might let it slip sometime. The boy would have to mature a bit. "Alright," said Jiraiya. He then bit his thumb hard enough to draw blood, went through a series of hand seals so quickly that Naruto didn't caught it despite knowing the jutsu, and slammed his palm on the ground, summoning technique. Smoke erupted from underneath Jiraiya's hand, and after it dissipated, a black and orange toad, with strange rings around his abdomen, could be seen sitting on the ground, with an annoyed expression on his face. "What do you want, Jiraiya? If you summoned me of all toads, I guess it has to be something in relation with the Haki no Fukin. Whatever it is, I think it's a bad idea," said the summoned toad. "Hello to you too, Jiratora," responded Jiraiya, ignoring the toad's opinion. "I need you in order to open the seal a little bit. I want to see how much of the Kyuubi's chakra Naruto can handle." "What? So you finally lost it after getting beaten into a pulp countless times by the women you peeped on? That's crazy, Jiraiya." The now named Jiratora croaked loudly. He then noticed Naruto, who had been silently following the exchange between the sage and his summon with a curious face. "And you even summon me when the boy is right here. This is madness." "Calm down," said Jiraiya in an authoritative tone. "I'm sure the shrimp can resist a small dose of the fox's chakra. But I still need to see where his limit is at. So give me the key." The toad grumbled and continued to protest for a bit, but Jiraiya's seriousness and faith in his student's strength finally made Jiratora give up. Fine, but I still have my doubts. I'm pretty sure something bad will happen, but since you want it so bad, here's your key." With that, the toad's abdomen opened and, between the metallic rings, a large scroll started to appear and, when it stopped, it opened to reveal a complex sealing matrix and a blank square above it. Jiraiya quickly took a peek at the formula before placing his right hand in the square, making his finger glow blue with chakra for a short time before the scroll closed and Jiratora shrank to his normal size. "There you have it. Now, I'm gone before I'm caught in whatever your experiment with the fox is." And, with no other form of goodbye, the toad disappeared in a puff of smoke. Jiraiya turned towards Naruto, who was starting to get impatient. "Are you done yet, Hiro-sennin? I want to start my training someday, you know." "Yeah, I got what I needed," said the toad sage. "We won't do that now in the middle of the road. There's an old keep not too far away from here, it'll be good enough to start your training and as a shelter for the night. Let's go." After quickly setting camp in the ruins of the fortress mentioned by Jiraiya, the sage and his student were now in the middle of the court, sitting in front of each other. Jiraiya glanced at the determined face of Naruto. He could still see a small amount of fear in his blue eyes, but it wouldn't be enough to make him back down, the toad sage knew it. Nevertheless, he decided to give a few encouraging words before they started. "I don't really know what you will go through when I open the seal, but I will repeat myself. I have faith in you. I am sure you have in you what is needed to keep the Kyuubi in check." Hearing his teacher's compliment made Naruto grinned. "Don't worry, Hiro-sennin. I won't disappoint you." Jiraiya could not help but smile. The blonde midget in front of him would never back down from a challenge when he was motivated. "I know that. Now show me your seal." Obeying his master's command, Naruto lifted his jumpsuit and the shirt underneath to expose his bare stomach. Closing his eyes in focus, he started to mold chakra, making the 8 trigram seal appear. Furrowing his eyebrows in concentration, Jiraiya carefully placed his right hand, which carried the key, on the seal and slowly opened it. Now let it be noted that, being a Sannin, Jiraiya was an extremely powerful shinobi. His experience with seals was unrivaled ever since the death of his late student, Namikaze Minato. Even such an intricate seal as the 8 trigram seal wouldn't be too much of a challenge to modify slightly. But he was human, and like every human, he wasn't perfect. Sometimes Jiraiya would make a mistake. In another timeline, maybe he wouldn't have made such a big one. Or perhaps none at all. But here, Jiraiya made a tragic one. He sneezed. When he was opening the seal containing the Kikbi. And when he sneezed, Jiraiya's hand slipped. Which resulted in making a gap in said seal. A big gap. Way bigger than what he originally intended to do. That was all he had the time to think before he was blasted away by a wave of pure demonic chakra. Pain. Pain like he never felt before. He was feeling like he was boiled alive and skinned at the same time, which was not really that far from the truth, given the effect the Kikbi's chakra had on his body, with the current quantity being released brutally. He first wondered if Hiro Sennin's snot was an acid of some sort, as the sage had sneezed right on his bare skin. Then, he was forcefully pulled into his mindscape, where something quite ugly was happening. Well, uglier than usual, as neither the sower that apparently was his mind or the Kikbi were really pretty. The water on the floor had turned blood red and was quickly rising. Naruto was already knee-deep inside it. The bars of the cage representing the seal were corroded. And, the most alarming thing, the Kikbi was smiling like a madman. Or a mad fox, rather. Well, look what we have here. The demon said in his deep and threatening voice, a little worm who thought he could control my power. I should thank your idiotic teacher, Ninjin. What have you done, stupid fox? What's happening? Naruto asked his tenant between labored breath. He was feeling even worse here, his body was still in pain, despite being a projection of his mind, and he felt like he was restrained, his movements felt heavy, like something wanted his limbs to move in another way. He was also feeling a pressure in the back of his head, like something was forcefully imposing its will directly through his skull. Overall, he felt powerless facing the rebelling Bijk. Hearing the weak question of his container, the Kikbi started to chuckle darkly, and his smile grew larger. But I did nothing, Ninjin. It was your pervert of a master that slipped when he opened this wretched seal. Now that more than half of my power has passed through, it will crumble very soon, and you are not even wearing your cursed necklace to hinder my full liberation. The demon answered with clear mirth. Indeed, Naruto wasn't wearing the necklace that he had won from Tsunade after he mastered the Rasengan. This necklace, who had belonged to the Shodai Hokage, Senju Hashirama, a long time ago, was still containing a bit of his chakra, which, thanks to his unique wood-style Kekkei Genkai, allowed him to subdue the Bijk. Jiraiya, suspecting that the necklace would prevent the Kikbi from possessing Naruto, had wanted to first make a test without, to have a peek at the real limits of the young Jinchuriki's hold over his tenant. And, when Naruto thought things couldn't get worse, his own mindscape started to battle him. The water representing the chakra leaking through the bars of the cage pushed him towards the seal itself and, as if it was alive, lifted him at the right height. Now I know that you are going through unimaginable pain because of my power, the Kikbi growled maliciously. We both know that you won't be able to contain me forever, so why not end your torment now? Free me, and I'll give you a swift death. Naruto's arm, disobeying his will, slowly started to raise, and his fingers were reaching for the paper that held the Kikbi prisoner. The blonde ninja was powerless as his own body, or its manifestation inside his mind, was moving under the command of the demon fox. What he was sure were his last thought went to his teachers, who he had failed, his friends, who he would never see again, Sakura, who he could not keep his promise to, and Sasuke, who he couldn't save from Orochimaru. But then, he felt a hand catch his arm before he could open the seal, and felt something cut through the air and speed past him towards the Kikbi. The next thing he knew, Naruto was on his back, in the water on the floor, which had returned to its normal state, and he was observed by two people that he didn't know. The first one was a tall and handsome man, with shoulder-length spiky blonde hair and cerulean eyes. He was wearing a standard Konoha outfit, with the addition of a long white haori with red flames adorning its edges and closed on the front by a thin red rope. The second was a beautiful woman with long red hair, dark blue eyes and a slender, but feminine build. She was wearing a white sleeveless blouse under a green dress, with a black wristband on her left arm and lavender sandals. The most outstanding thing about this woman, however, were the numerous chakra chain coming out of her back. Said chain were currently restraining the Kikbi and keeping his chakra behind the seal, allowing the rest of Naruto's mindscape to regain its normal peaceful state. The blonde genin, however, was currently freaking out. There were people in his mindscape. People that he never met before. And yet there was something about this man and this woman that made him feel strange. Made him feel calm and safe, like everything would be okay. They made him feel appreciated, wanted, loved. Perhaps it was the way they were looking at him. He was not used to this kind of looks. When he was young, people would look at him with disdain, hate, or indifference. While growing up, those looks were slowly disappearing, but they were still there. Ever since the Chunin exams and his fight against Heikaniji, people finally started to look at him with affection, pride, and, sometimes, admiration, even more so when the rumors stated that he was the one who had defeated the bloodthirsty Sabaku no Gaara. There were still a few angry or hateful faces here and there, but way less than before. But the man and the woman in front of him, their eyes held so much care and love, it actually scared Naruto. Nobody had ever looked at him that way before. Before he could think more about this, the woman started to talk in a warm and soothing voice that instantly drawn Naruto to her. "I'm so happy to finally meet you, Naruto." He had to fight down the urge to run towards this woman and to hug her as hard as he could. He didn't know her, he couldn't afford to let his guard slip now. "Who are you? What are you two doing in my mind?" Naruto asked. To his dismay, the two strangers started to chuckle, but not as if they were mocking him. It was a sad laugh. He could recognize it easily, he had often heard the same coming from his own mouth. Taking a closer look at the man, Naruto had the sudden impression that his face was familiar. Very familiar. Like something he had seen every day of his young life. Something sculpted in a cliff above Konoha. With a bewildered expression and a shaking finger pointed at the man in question, the blonde genin couldn't help but state in a disbelieving tone, "You're the Yondaime Hokage." The now identified shinobi couldn't help but chuckle, this time with amusement at the face Naruto was making, a mixture of surprise, awe, fear and confusion. "Yep, that's me," he confirmed, "but it feels kind of weird being called by your title by your son like that." "What? Your son?" Naruto asked. If there was a picture next to disbelief in the dictionary, it would be the face the blonde boy was making right now. It's not real. You can't be real. You're dead." Both adults flinched after hearing Naruto's outburst, and their expressions changed to one of profound caring to one of distress. They looked both sad and fearful. The red-haired woman took an hesitant step forward and glanced at Naruto with such longing that, once again, he had to restrain himself, otherwise he would hug her and never let go. He didn't know where this urge came from, and it started to make him curious and, at the same time, worried. Who were these two people that he felt so connected to? His curiosity was short-lived, as the woman answered his silent question in an hesitant yet loving and hopeful voice. "It's true, Naruto, he is your father." She then took a deep breath, like what she was going to say would change the blonde boy's life. And it would, indeed. She then seemed to resolve herself, and, with more confidence, a small yet beautiful smile, and a hand over her heart, she finished, "I am your mother." Naruto's eyes widened, hope and tears were starting to gather in his heart and eyes respectively. Was it true? Could this two people, one being the Yondaime Hokage no less, be? "We are your parents." Disclaimer, I, still, do not own Naruto. For a few moments, Jiraiya memories were blurry. Did Tsunade caught him peeping again? Or did Gamabunta finally had enough of him and decided to get rid of his summoner? Shaking his head to get rid of the dizziness provoked by his sudden encounter with a stone wall, Jiraiya suddenly was very aware of the oppressive feeling floating in the air, the evil chakra swirling everywhere in the court of the now even more ruined keep, but the thing he was the most aware of was the dark five-tailed figure that was steadily getting larger standing on all four in front of him. The sage immediately darted away before being beheaded by the clawed hand of what used to be Naruto. The old shinobi suddenly recalled what had happened before he was thrown against the wall. He had fucked up. It was his fault his pupil was in this state and, judging by the sixth tail growing on his backside, there was little chance that the seal would hold. The Jinchuriki now had a fox skeleton hovering over his body and already the dark red chakra was starting to gather around the bones. Cursing himself again for his stupid sneezing fit and his idea of not letting Naruto wear the Shadai's necklace, Jiraiya had only two options left, fleeing to Konoha to report his failure and getting murdered by Tsunade, or stay and most likely die trying to seal back the Kikbi inside of Naruto, or at least putting an end to his suffering. He did not consider himself a gutsy shinobi for nothing. He would stay. Preparing himself for what was most likely the last fight of his life, Jiraiya pumped his chakra into his legs and, like a toad, jumped high enough to land on the top of the tower in the center of the ruins, where he had set camp earlier with Naruto, giving him a full view of what his pupil had become. His body had grown to immense size, already slightly bigger than Gamabunta, and the skeleton that used to float around his body could be seen under the red chakra that his skin was made of. He was now truly looking like a monster fox, and his form was visibly solidifying, and flesh was starting to appear of his back. Snarling angrily at the toad sage, the almost complete Kikbi opened his mouth wide and, using the tip of his tails, now 7 in total, started to form a menacing black ball of raw chakra. After it was completely formed, the ball suddenly condensed and grew small enough for the fox to swallow it. The sheer amount of chakra he just absorbed made his face and stomach swell to what would be considered comic proportion if the situation wasn't so tragic. Foreseeing what hell was about to be unleashed upon him, Jiraiya jumped just in time to avoid the enormous beam of chakra that the Kikbi aimed at him. The evening sky was brightly illuminated for a moment, and when the beam finally disappeared, there was nothing left of the tower Jiraiya just stood on a few moments ago. Noticing that he missed his target, the Kikbi howled in rage and opted to turn the sage into a very thin red paste by using his tails. The Sannin was hard-pressed to avoid the violent assault of the Bijk, but he had to reach for his and Naruto's backpacks, where he had several repression seals stored and where his student had left his necklace before they started their training. He doubted that his seals would hold the fox for long, but it might give him enough time to prepare a more powerful one. As quickly as it had started, the Kyuubi stopped his attack and once again opened his mouth. This time, however, it wasn't a beam of chakra, but a torrent of white-hot flames that the demon aimed at Jiraiya. Swiftly, the sage took out of his kimono a scroll and unrolling it on the ground, revealed the sealing matrix written inside. Charging his hand with chakra, Jiraiya slammed it in front of the scroll. Sealing jutsu. Fire seal. After the sage yelled the name of his technique, the wave of fire breathed out by the Kyuubi was quickly absorbed into the scroll, where the kanji for fire appeared once the sealing was complete. Roaring in rage after seeing his attack absorbed by Jiraiya, the fox started once again to charge one of his Bijgama, but this one was much larger than his previous bomb. Jiraiya, on the other hand, was getting desperate. Sealing such a powerful fire attack had costed him a lot of chakra. And, if things could not get worse, he finally noticed that the two backpacks he was looking for were just near the Kyuubi's front left paw. Approaching this close was suicide, and even if he did have the time to prepare a seal strong enough to contain the Bijk, he certainly didn't have enough chakra left to apply it. Sighing in defeat, Jiraiya turned his gaze one last time towards what used to be Naruto. His apprentice. His godson. The sage could not help but be happy that he was going to die. At least, he would join the blonde genin in the afterlife, where he hoped he would be forgiven for his mistakes, present and past. This training trip, while primarily aimed to make Naruto strong enough to face the Akatsuki, was also a way for Jiraiya to make amends for the time he had missed with his godson. He knew that Konoha had needed his spy network more than ever after the Kyuubi's attack and Minato's death, and that it was his duty as a leaf shinobi to protect the village before anything else, but he still felt horrible, knowing he had left Naruto to grow alone and hated by a majority of the villagers. He had sent a few gifts for his birthday and checked up on him when he was in the village, but he had never presented himself. He knew that if he had done that, he wouldn't have been able to left his godson alone once again when he was away on a long-term mission. It still hurted him deeply, as he was also breaking his promise to Minato and Kushina to raise Naruto, should something happen to them. It had been his duty as a godfather, but it came after his duty as a shinobi. It was the sad truth of the ninja world. The village always came first. But the training trip was a perfect occasion to combine both and at the same time bond with Naruto. He could be annoying and loud from time to time, or rather all the time, but he was also passionate and determined, and his smile was contagious. Just like his mother. Speaking of which, Jiraiya hoped that castration was impossible in the afterlife, or at least not painful, because he heavily doubted that Kushina would let him keep his manhood or any other part of his body intact after she learned that he was responsible of her son's death. All of that because of a stupid sneeze. But soon, it would not really matter anymore. The now 8-tailed Kyuubi's body was now entirely made out of flesh, rather than raw chakra. All that was missing was the last tail and the fur, and the fox's resurrection would be complete. But, to Jiraiya's astonishment, just as the Bijk was about to fire his now fully charged Bijgama, he suddenly collapsed and, in an eruption of smoke, disappeared, leaving only a naked and unconscious Naruto, laying in the middle of the ruined fortress. Swiftly getting up, Jiraiya ran to Naruto's side. Kneeling next to the blonde, he quickly started looking for any sign showing that his godson was still alive. To his relief, he felt a somewhat weak but steady pulse. "Thank Kami," Jiraiya whispered in exhaustion. After escaping the smashing tails and using the fire seal on the Kyuubi's blazing torrent, combined with the dread of having seemingly killed Naruto, the sage was feeling tired. But he had one last thing to check up. Looking at the 8-trigram seal, Jiraiya was baffled to see that it was slowly closing. Despite being a seal master, he had no idea of how this was possible. Maybe something was happening in the mindscape that Naruto had mentioned he already had visited just before he summoned Gamabunta for the first time. It was the only thing that he could think of. Whatever was going on, he hoped that his godson would be alright. Finally giving in to his exhaustion, Jiraiya dropped down next to his unconscious pupil, coming to the same conclusion that his sensei, the Sandaime Hokage, had before him. "I am getting too old for this shit. We are your parents." This simple sentence almost made Naruto faint. His emotions could be read on his face, one after the other: happiness, disbelief, fear, confusion, anger, sadness, they all flashed quickly in his eyes and his mind. He had parents. His father was the Yondaime. But it was impossible. How could they be here? And why? Was it a trick from the Kyuubi? After all, he couldn't be the son of Yondaime, right? Or could he? Could the Yondaime seal the Kyuubi in his own son, leaving him alone in a village that shunned him? And his mother? Was she dead too? Was he dead? But no, he was still in his mindscape, and the Kyuubi was still restrained by the chain coming out of his mother's back. Both his parents were holding their breath, not that it mattered if they didn't, since they were dead. But some habits die hard, even when you do die. Kushina and Minato were extremely afraid. How would their son react? Would he accept them despite the burden they had put on his shoulder the day he was born, or would he blame them for the crappy childhood he had to go through and that they had witnessed through his memories? Naruto himself couldn't choose how to react. His emotions were in turmoil. When he thought he had settled for one, another would replace it. But, finally, he decided. He chose anger. And, to show it, he kicked Minato as hard as he could in the most sensitive area of his anatomy. Crumbling on the floor in pain holding his genitals, the yondaime did nothing to prevent his son from unleashing more kicks on his legs, back, stomach and head. He couldn't really blame Naruto. Kushina, seeing her son violently kick her husband and his family jewels, could only gasp before trying to restrain the furious blonde boy. The both of them had expected him to react like that, but they had hoped that maybe he would ask questions first before unleashing his righteous anger. Naruto, tired of kicking Minato, decided to put his fury into words. Why? Why did you seal the Kijbi inside of me if I am your son? How could you do this? Do you know how hard it was for me? Do you? I was either ignored or outright hated by the villagers. I barely had any friends at the academy. The tears finally fell as Naruto was confronting the man responsible of his lonely childhood. His hero. His father. The Sandaime had explained to him that it was the only solution to stop the Kijbi and that he understood if he resented the yondaime, but it had been his duty as Hokage to protect the village, no matter what. Now that he thought about it, Naruto realized that the old man surely knew about his parents, but never told him. The only thing he had said when Naruto had asked about his family was that they died during the Kijbi's attack. It was technically the truth, but only a part of it. Realizing that the man he saw as a grandfather had kept the identity of his parents away from him only made the young ninja angrier. But before he could lash out again, he was suddenly embraced by Kushina. His anger vanished instantly. Feeling his mother hug him, like he had seen other children, and something he had longed for as long as he could remember, finally made him break down, and he started to cry loudly on Kushina's shoulder. She took this opportunity to slowly stroke his back and whisper calming words to him. I know you are angry, Sachi, and I understand. Minato also understands. But we never wanted you to suffer like you had. We wanted to see you make your first step, hear your first word, see you out on your first day at the academy, but what we wanted the most was for you to live. Please, Naruto, let us a chance to explain. Regaining a bit of control over his falling tears, Naruto raised his head and looked right in the dark blue eyes of his mother. Why, he said between sniffles, I just want to know why. Instead of Kushina, it was Minato who answered him after he had shakily stood up. Because I couldn't ask for other parents to sacrifice their child. As the Hokage, it was my duty to defend the village, even at the cost of my life, and, unfortunately, my son's happiness. He started, with a sad face. But he slowly started to smile proudly at Naruto, and because I knew that you would be able to keep the fox's influence at bay. You are our son after all. He finished as he knelt beside Kushina. But his expression changed again, and this time Minato had a grim face on. There is also more to the Kijbi's attack than just the fox's desire to destroy Konoha. Yet I would have enjoyed to turn your accursed village into ashes. Yondaime, Kushina. The family of three turned to notice that the Kijbi had managed to raise his head despite the chain around his neck, and he was now glaring at the reunited parents and child. I certainly didn't want to see you again after putting up with your furry ass for so long, fox. Hissed Kushina as she glared back at the bijk. Putting up with him? What do you mean? Asked a confused Naruto. Kushina turned back to look sadly at her son. You are not the first Uzumaki to contain the Kijbi. I was his Jinchuriki before you, just like Uzumaki Mito, the Shodai Hokage's wife, was before me. She answered. Shock was written all over Naruto's face after hearing his mother's revelation. He had not been the only one cursed with the fox. His mother had been too. But something didn't add up. But if you were containing the Kijbi, how could he have attacked Konoha? He asked. Again it was Minato who answered him. That was what I was going to explain before we were rudely interrupted. He said with a glare of his own, when a female Jinchuriki is about to give birth, the seal containing the bijk is weakened because the chakra is more focused on the baby than on the demon. And it was at this moment, just when you were born, that a masked man appeared out of nowhere. Minato then went on explaining, with Kushina throwing a remark here and there, how this man threatened and almost killed Naruto, kidnapped Kushina after distracting him, and how he then freed the Kijbi from her. The blonde genin was listening intently and, unknown to any of them, so was the fox. Truth be told, his memories of that night were blurry. He remembered trying to break of his shackles when Kushina was in labor, and the next thing he knew he was in the middle of Konoha, assaulted by an army of shinobi. He knew that Kushina had been moved out of the village to prevent an accident, but he had attributed his sudden appearance in Konoha as a symptom of his liberation. He had been forced to turn into an unstable mass of chakra to break out of the seal, and he had thought that in this state, his consciousness may have been in a state of stasis, and that his body had reformed inside of the village. He wasn't really sure as he never had been freed from a seal before. But what Minato would say next would break his theory down. After that, I managed to save Kushina, but this man had already managed to put the Kyuubi under his control. What? The fox howled in rage and disbelief. No one could control him like that. No one amongst the living. You are lying, Yondaime. Nobody can put me under their control. You are lying. There used to be one person though, am I right? Minato asked the Bijk. He is dead. You know that very well, Yondaime. And yet the man who kidnapped Kushina managed to put you under a genjutsu and force you to attack Konoha. And, when I fought him later on, he did not deny being Uchiha Madara after I questioned him. No. He can't be alive. I saw the Shodai kill him. He can't be alive. Roared the Kyuubi in denial. It couldn't be. This man couldn't be back from the dead. But that would explain why he had trouble remembering the event of this night. He had been put under a genjutsu because of a Sharingan. It had been the same during the battle between Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama. The Shodai has restrained him using his wood style and let his wife Mito seal the fox inside herself because of his power, yet the only thing he had remembered before finding himself bound by Hashirama was meeting Madara and being treated as a mere dog. After that, his memories were extremely scarce. It was only when Mito had told him of the battle between the two shinobi, when she had entered her mindscape for the first time, that he had been aware of the fact that Madara was able to enslave him with the power of his eyes. This news had put him into a rage like he had never felt before. A human had the power to control him. And he hadn't even been aware of it. To think that a miserable and malicious creature such as a human could control him was outrageous. But at least, Madara had died, and his hold on the Kyuubi had been weak enough at the end to allow the fox to witness his demise. But, somehow, he was still alive and was after his power again. Naruto, however, was growing more and more confused. I don't understand. Who was this Madara guy? He was one of the two founder of Konoha, along with the Shodai, Senju Hashirama. Said Kushina, he was also the strongest among the Uchihas. But, after the foundation of the village, Madara went rogue and eventually he was defeated by Hashirama at the place now known as the Valley of the End. Defeated, but not killed, it seems. The Valley of the End, thought Naruto. It was there that he had fought Sasuke and nearly died trying to bring him back to Konoha a few months ago. Now you know why I had to seal the Kyuubi inside of you, Naruto said Minato. I had to stop his rampage and prevent Madara for keeping him under his control. But it was also a way for me to protect you. Protect me? How does sealing a demon inside of me would protect me? Asked Naruto, feeling his anger rising again. Because I knew that, in time, you would be able to master his power. And I knew that you were the best person I could entrust this power with. You are our child, and I was confident that I had left Konoha's safety in good hands. Responded his father, while ruffling his hair. More than the total confidence coming from Minato, it was this simple gesture that calmed Naruto. He had seen children getting their hair ruffled like that by their father when they were proud of them. The Sandaime, Haruka, Kakashi and Jiraiya had done the same to him. But feeling his father doing it as he had felt his mother hug him brought him to tears. He couldn't help it. I understand if you can't forgive me for what I did, continued the elder blonde sadly, but I hope you understand that I never wanted you to suffer. I wanted you to be safe. I wanted you to be viewed as the hero who was keeping the village safe by containing the Bijk, but apparently, I was too optimistic. He then bowed in front of Naruto. I am sorry for the hard times that you had to go through. I am so sorry, Naruto my son. He was still a bit angry at Minato, but yes, now he understood why he had been chosen to be the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, because his father, the Yondaime Hokage, had entrusted him with the power to protect the village. Because he was certain that his son would be able to master it. Because he knew that no matter what, he would be proud of him. Not proud like a Hokage. Proud like a father. I understand and I am still a bit mad at you, but I managed. After all, I'm the son of the Yondaime, you know. Ain't that right, Dad? Hearing Naruto calling him Two-chan brought Minato to tears, just as Kushina started to cry as she saw her son forgive his father. But still, said Naruto, how are you guys here? I mean, suddenly, the blonde genin looked at his parents like they were the spookiest thing ever. You're not ghosts, right? No, well, not exactly, replied Minato after getting his emotions back under control. The jutsu I used to seal half of the Kyuubi power inside of you, the Shikifujin, is casted at the cost of the user's life. And your mother was dying, as a Jinchuriki who gets their Bijk extracted will inevitably die. As such, when I was performing the sealing, I also put a small amount of my and Kushina's chakra inside the 8 trigram seal, in case the seal was breaking or for when you decided to take control of the Kyuubi's chakra. But now that I mention it, he then looked at his wife. We weren't supposed to appear together. Turning his attention back to Naruto, he asked him what happened. Naruto, who had forgot the situation he was in after the shock of meeting his parents, remembered suddenly the accident provoked by Jiraiya. Oh, that's right. He exclaimed, Iro Sennin wanted to open the seal a little to see how much of the Kyuubi's chakra I could control. And when he was doing it, he sneezed. He sneezed? Asked Kushina incredulously. What the fuck? How can that guy sneeze when he opens a Jinchuriki seal? His godson seal no less. Iro Senin. Said Minato. Despite what he had just learned, it was clear that he had a hard time containing a chuckle. He suddenly collapsed on the floor again, in laughter this time. This is rich. I never thought of that surname before. That's genius, Naruto. How can you be laughing like that when our baby could have died because of that perverted dummy? Asked Kushina angrily at her hilarious husband. Hold on a second. Shouted Naruto. Hirosenin is my godfather. Yes he is. Answered Kushina. Now that I think about it, I only saw him quite recently in your memories. Where was he all this time? He was supposed to take care of you, you know. He probably was extremely busy after the accident, Kushina. Said Minato after putting himself together for a second time. Even during my reign as Hokage, our situation wasn't that bright. The aftermath of the Third Shinobi War had left us in a weakened state despite our victory. And the Kyuubi's attack probably did not make things better. Hiruzen-sama had probably no choice but to put Jiraiya on long-term spying mission. But even so I would have expected him to check up on you once in a while. Well, he didn't. Said Naruto, angry once again. If I ever meet him again, he better watch out for his balls. Believe it. Said Kushina, just as angry as her son. At the same time, in the real world, Jiraiya suddenly had visions of a very angry female Uzumaki glaring at him with eyes that screamed bloody murder while she was sharpening a sword. He decided to put his hands defensively in front of his manhood, just in case. Back in Naruto's mindscape, Minato sighed, feeling a bit sorry for his sensei, but only a bit. He himself had some words to say to the man about leaving his son alone during his childhood or throwing him off a cliff for training. But they had more important matters to discuss right now. He could already feel that the majority of his chakra had disappeared. He and Kushina didn't have much time left with Naruto. Since we are here, he started, I might as well restore the seal. And maybe we could try, with Kushina's chains, to take a bit of hold on, Yondaime. Said the Kyuubi. He had listened to their conversation and, from what Minato had said, it seems that Madara needed to extract him out of Kushina to control him. Which means that, while he was inside of Naruto, he should be out of the Uchiha's grip. But his container was weak. He wouldn't last against a former clan head. And if the Kyuubi had managed to free himself, he would have been once again at the mercy of Madara. He would rather die. Which left him only one option, one that he hated. But it was that, or slavery. And the fox was definitely not a fan of slavery. Since that damned Madara is after me once again, he will eventually hunt the little ninja here. Which means that maybe we could come to he then made a face that, if he was human, would look like he was about to throw up. A truce. At that, Minato raised an eyebrow. A truce. I thought you wanted to be free. Oh, I still want to, Yondaime, but if Madara catches me again, he will eventually control with his wretched eyes. And I really don't want to be controlled by that man. But, from what I can understand from your story, he can't control me if I am sealed, which means that, as long as you are sealed inside of me, you are safe, right? Concluded Naruto, who had managed to come to this on his own. The Kyuubi looked at him with a small amount of surprise in his eyes. You are not as dumb as you look, ninja. Yes, it seems the only way for me to stay out of Madara's reach is to be kept inside of you. Unfortunately for me, you are laughably weak, even for a human. Hey. I'm not dumb, and I'm not weak. Believe it. Yes, you are. You were helpless when that Uchiha and that fishman came to capture you. If not for your stupid teacher, you would most likely be dead right now and me on a leash. Even that boy you consider a brother almost killed you because you were too weak. So what did you mean by a truce? Asked a curious Minato. He was intrigued by what the Kyuubi was meaning. If he was going to where he thought he was going, I mean that, as long as Madara is alive, neither me or the little ninja are safe. Which means that we have common interests. I don't like it, not at all, but I refuse to be the Uchiha's lapdog ever again. I'd rather have this little idiot controlling me. Are you saying? Started an incredulous Kushina. Yes, the Kyuubi answered with a disgusted expression. He had really no choice here. But at least, he would keep his free WLL. What? What's he saying? Asked Naruto, who was lost again. I take back what I just said earlier, you are as dumb as you look. Growled the Kyuubi. It was hard enough to accept what he was forced to do, but now he had to say it out loud. Since we are both pursued by the same man, you for me and me for my strength, we will have to once again. The fox looked like he was about to throw up. Disgust was written all over his vulpine face. Work together. Work together? You mean like I can have all the chakra I want? Asked a giddy Naruto. He had feared the Kyuubi would take control of him if he was using too much of its chakra. But if they were working together, there was no need to be worried about that, right? However, this was not what the Kyuubi had in mind at all. No. I won't be treated as a chakra battery to use when you want to pull out one of your stupid jutsu. I will allow you to use a small part of my chakra and I may increase the amount I give you should you prove yourself strong enough. I will also have other gifts to share with you, but I expect concessions on your part too." Naruto only nodded without saying anything that might anger the Bijk further. For the Kyuubi to allow him to use a small part of his chakra as he saw fit was already a pretty good deal. However, the last point the fox had made worried him a little. "What concessions are you talking about? We will discuss that later, Ninjin. I still have a lot to think about and I still have to deal with the fact that I am forced to share a part of my strength with a shrimp like you." The Kyuubi then glared at Kushina, wood was still binding him with her chakra chains. "Could you free me now? I won't try to break out of here anymore until we deal with Madara, that is." Kushina eyed him suspiciously before nodding. The chains then retracted into her back and the Kyuubi was finally able to shift to a more comfortable position, deeper inside his cage. "Now, get out of my sight." The fox snarled. "I saw you enough when you two were alive, say whatever you want to say to the little ninja during the little time you have left, but somewhere else." "Yeah, for once I agree with the fox," said Minato. "Let's move to another place, shall we?" He then snapped his fingers and the sowers disappeared. Now, the little family were floating in what seemed to be a void where the only things visible were shifting shades of yellow and red, sometimes mixing to create a bright orange. The three immediately relaxed. The Kyuubi's aura of rage and hatred was not something really pleasant. Naruto, despite the warm atmosphere of wherever they were now, was feeling extremely sad. His parents were going to disappear. They were already becoming sleekly transparent and the outlines of their figures were getting blurry. Despite the anger he had initially felt in the few moments he had spent with them, he knew that he was going to miss them immensely. The brief peek he had at what his life with his parents could have been wasn't enough. As an orphan, a family was something he had always dreamed of, perhaps even more so than being Hokage. And now that he had a taste of what it was like, he wanted more. In desperation he threw himself at his mother and hugged her with all he had. Fortunately for her, Kushina was a shinobi, but even so, Naruto's embrace was really tight. "I don't want you to go. Mom, Dad. I just barely had time to meet you." He was openly crying, and so were his parents. They were as sad as Naruto, as they had wanted to raise their child. Being an orphan and one of the last of her clan respectively, Minato and Kushina had been overjoyed to hear that she was pregnant. But Madara had taken that away from them. And, crying in his mother's chest, Naruto now understood Sasuke's desire for revenge. The last loyal Uchiha had claimed that their situation was completely different. That they could never understand him, never going through the pain of losing someone, as he never had anyone. But now he understood. And Naruto, too, wanted revenge. And he would have a Bijk, even though a reluctant one, at his side. Sensing her son shaking in rage, Kushina delicately rubbed his back to soothe him. She couldn't blame him for being angry, heck, she was angry herself. But she wouldn't let this anger spoil the brief moment they were allowed together as a family. "I know how you feel, Sachi," she said in a soft voice. "But don't let your rage get the better of you. Don't be like your friend Sasuke. Even if the Kyuubi agreed to let you use a part of his chakra, you will not be free of its influence." A little calmer, Naruto looked up with teary eyes to meet Kushina's loving eyes. No matter what, witnessing so much affection directed at him felt weird. The good kind of weird. Something he could get used to. But, if somebody looked at him like that ever again, it wouldn't be his parents. And that felt horrible. What do you mean? If he lets me take his chakra, I'll be fine, right?" he asked. "Not necessarily," she answered sadly. "A Bijk is made of chakra and as such, his chakra will always carry a bit of his consciousness in its flow. Even if he gives it willingly, the Kyuubi's bloodlust will still affect you. But then how do I keep his influence away?" Naruto asked with desperation. What good would the fox cooperation would do to him if he could still be possessed? There is something that can keep the demon's hatred away, but you can only get it from another person. Kushina said, glancing at the same time at Minato, who was watching the mother-son moment with a smile. It was important that his wife passed her experience as a Jinchuriki to their son. It would be of precious help to him in the future. "What is it?" "Simple, it's love." Naruto looked a bit dumbfounded. "That was it? Don't underestimate its power. Sachi, your father, is what helped me keep the Kyuubi restrained, even more so than my special chakra," Kushina said to her son. "Find someone who will fill the hole in your heart and you will be able to resist the Kyuubi's hatred. This is what Mito-sama taught me, and this knowledge, I am now giving it to you." She then hugged her son back with all the strength her rapidly degrading chakra-made body could muster, and she dragged Minato in the embrace with them. It was time, Naruto realized. Time to say goodbye to his parents that he would not see again until he too joined them in the afterlife, if there was any afterlife at all. It was not something he wanted to think of right now. He was entirely focused on his parents' departing words. "I don't really have anything left to say to you, Naruto. Your mother said it all," Minato said. Even his voice was starting to fade slowly. The only thing I could add is, again, my apologies for what I had to put on your shoulders the very day you were born. But despite all the hard times that you faced, that you grew into a young man I am proud to call my son." Once again, hearing how proud his father was of him made Naruto's tears fall faster. He couldn't take it. He couldn't lose them again. "Don't be too sad," Naru-chan whispered Kushina. Or at least, it sounded like a whisper, as they were almost invisible. The blonde genin could barely see his parents over the colorful background of his mindscape. "Just remember what I said about love and remember to eat vegetables and to sleep correctly at night now." Her voice was barely audible. "I also want at least 4 grandkids, you know," she added with a tearful chuckle. Naruto couldn't see them anymore, he couldn't feel their arms around him, but their presence was still there, fading way too fast. "No matter what happens, we will always be proud of you, Naruto," he managed to hear Minato said. And their last words, their very last words, despite being nothing more but the whisper of a whisper, still rang louder than a thunderstorm in the blonde boy's ears, mind and heart. "We love you, Naruto." And with that, the last remnants of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina were gone. And, feeling alone and vulnerable without the comforting presence of his parents at his side, the presence he had longed for ever since he knew what parents were, Uzumaki Naruto, #1 hyperactive knucklehead ninja of Konohamaru no Sado, and Jinchuriki of the Kikbi no Inko, cried loudly in the solitude of his mindscape. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto. Naruto had fallen asleep after crying for what seemed hours. The shock, joy, and pain of meeting his parents and then seeing them go, mixed with the initial anger he had felt at Minato, and the fact that he had just been saved from a near full possession by the timely intervention of Kushina's chains, had exhausted him completely. He had fallen asleep in his mindscape, and he awoke to find himself in the real world. From the position of the sun in the sky, he guessed that it was around 4 in the afternoon. He was still where he had set camp with Jiraiya the day before, except the old keep was now little more than a pile of boulders in the middle of the woods. Naruto found himself in his sleeping bag, wearing his spare clothes, consisting of a simple white shirt with a red whirlpool on the front and black shorts. He did not thought of where his beloved jumpsuit might be, as he already had a lot on his mind. Naruto had learned much earlier than other people that crying over your situation wasn't going to make it any better. He had cried, of course. Every little boy would cry if a whole village was either ignoring or rejecting you, save for a few person. But to keep crying wasn't going to change the people's mind. So he had toughen up and put on a smile. Very often, it was a fake smile, just to hide his pain for his few precious people, or to convince himself that he was happy. Fortunately, ever since he became a genin, he had needed it less and less, as he made more friends, and people started to view him as a person, rather than as a prison for a gigantic fox. But now, it was strange. It felt both better and worse than before. He had parents. Parents that loved him. He hadn't just popped out of nowhere or been abandoned as a baby. But it had been short, so short. He wasn't going to keep crying. His mother asked him not to be too sad. He would cherish the memories of the past night, but he didn't feel like smiling right now. Not even a fake one. Besides, he had serious matters to think of. He had to talk with the Kikbi about their alliance of sword. But right now, he was thinking about a specific man. His godfather. Now, Naruto was not a person to hold grudges. He had forgiven Minato for sealing the fox inside of him. But his father had done what he had thought best in a dire situation. If Naruto had to put in more childish words, Minato had an excuse. But Jiraiya had one for not, at the very least, let him know that he had family left. To check up on him once in a while. It wasn't much, was it? With all the peeping the sage was doing, he could very well take 2 hours or so to go and meet up with his godson, the son of his apprentice, right? Yet, he never did. Speaking of Jiraiya, Naruto noticed him sitting against what was left of a wall, a few feet away. He looked to be deep in thoughts, his eyes closed, and wasn't aware that his pupil was now awake. And indeed, Jiraiya was doing some serious thinking right now. While it was a relief that Naruto's transformation had stopped, how did it happen? For the life of him he couldn't understand this sudden interruption during the Kikbi's release. Was there a failsafe on the seal? Did Naruto, somehow, subdue the fox? His train of thoughts was interrupted when a pebble hit his eye. Opening his eyes, the sage was surprised and happy to see that his pupil was up. He immediately got up and knelt beside him. "Naruto. You're finally awake," he said with joy. "Are you okay? How's your seal?" "I'm fine, it's fine," the blonde answered in a flat voice. Jiraiya sighed in relief before a sheepish expression appeared on his face. "Look Gaki-hum, I'm sorry about that sneeze last night. I could have killed you with that. Perhaps we shouldn't." "It's okay, Hiro-sennin, I'm not mad at you for that," interrupted Naruto. After all, it was because of that accident that he had met his parents. "Really? Just like that? I know you are quick to forgive, Gaki, but I almost freed the Kikbi last night. You are not even a little bit angry." "Oh, I'm plenty angry, Jiraiya." Huh?" The sage was confused. If Naruto wasn't angry at him for his slip the day before, then why was he? And why was he calling him by his name rather than Hirosenin? Where were you? The blonde genin asked, an edge in his voice. What? Have you hit your head or something? I was. Where were you when I was all alone? When I thought I didn't have any family? You're my godfather, right? Jiraiya's heart missed a beat and his blood ran cold. How do you know that? I know because when you fucked up with my seal, I met my parents in my mindscape. The sage looked at his godson in disbelief. Had he heard right? Hold on, you met Minato and Kushina. But they're dead, how could you? Naruto angrily interrupted him a third time. Yes, they are. But when dad sealed the fox inside of me, he also left a bit of his and K-chan's chakra in it too. And when you opened the seal, they appeared to save me. A chakra imprint. Thought Jiraiya. So that's how the Kyuubi's resurrection had been stopped. It's so simple, yet so clever. Minato was really a genius with seals. Can you tell me exactly what happened in your mindscape? The sage asked his student. Instead of getting an answer, all he achieved was to make Naruto angrier. Don't change the subject, you old fart. I want to know why you left me alone. At least you could have let me know that I had someone who gave a damn about me besides Hokage and Iruka-sensei. Another sigh. A tired, regretful one this time. So much for catching up with his godson during that training trip. Alright, I will tell you. But please, don't interrupt me again. I know I fucked up. Big time. But I didn't really had a choice. Naruto didn't snap at him this time. He just sat straighter, crossed his arms on his chest and glared furiously at his teacher. Jiraiya slowly massaged his temples before he began explaining his reasons to his pupil. It was going to be difficult. He sighed one last time before throwing himself in a long explanation and a painful reminiscence. When your parents died, it hit me hard. Minato was almost like a son to me. I really wanted to take you in, but Sarutobi-sensei estimated that I was in no shape to take care of you. And he wasn't wrong. I was feeling like crap at this point, and the Sandaime insisted that I maintain my spy network. He promised me that he would take care of you, so I agreed. Naruto still didn't move or opened his mouth. Neither did he stop glaring. I know that it's not what you wanted to hear, but yes. I chose duty over you. The Sannin continued. Konoha was vulnerable. When Minato was Hokage, we still hadn't fully recovered from the Third Shinobi War. The Kyuubi's attack and your father's death only made the village's state worse. I am a shinobi of the leaf, and as such it was my duty to protect Konoha, even if it meant breaking my promise to Minato and Kushina, but by protecting the village, I was also protecting you. And it was impossible to take me with you. I was always on the move, gathering informations. That's not the life for a baby. Naruto's anger subsided a little bit. His godfather had to follow orders, just like any ninja. But still, you could have at least dropped by every once in a while, he muttered. Yes, I could have, but I was afraid that if I ever went to you, I would never be able to leave you alone again. And it was for your safety. Naruto was confused by Jiraiya's statement. My safety. Leaving me alone in a village that resented me was for my safety. Your dad was well known in the ninja world and he had many enemies, notably in Iwagakure, after he killed 1,000 of their men by himself. Answered the Sannin. And it was well known that I was his master. I'm pretty famous myself after all. So, what do you think would have happened if Tsuchikage heard that the Toad Sage, former sensei of the Yellow Flash, was looking after a blonde child? I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have hesitated to send assassins after you. That made Naruto think for a bit. He had learned at the academy that the Yondaime Hokage was hated in Iwa because of his exploits during the war. But did they really want revenge so much that they would kill a child? There are people who would kill me just to get back at my dad. He asked, fearing the answer. Yes. Jiraiya grimly responded. Grudges can last for a long while in the ninja world, Naruto. Even if he is dead, Minato is still hated in Iwa. Kumo doesn't really like him either. And he had a lot more enemies than that through the elemental nations. His expression shifted and a small smile slowly formed on the elder shinobi's face. I did check up on you, you know. Half of your monthly allowance actually comes from me. I just thought keeping my distance was the better option. I was probably wrong. I am almost always wrong and, to be frank, one of the reasons I took you on this training trip, besides preparing you against the Akatsuki, was to making it up to you. Naruto bowed his head down, hiding his eyes from Jiraiya. Once again, he found himself conflicted, just like he had been with his father. Their decisions may have been questionable, but they had the best intentions in mind when they took them. The blonde boy had one last question for his godfather. What about my parents? When were you planning on telling me? I wanted to wait for you to mature a bit. The sage answered. I feared that learning that your own father sealed the Kyuubi inside of you would make you snap, but it seems you took it pretty well. At first, not so much, but I learned some things about that night and in the end, I can't really blame him, he was doing his duty, like you. Naruto said sadly. Jiraiya put a comforting hand on his godson's shoulder and, fortunately, he didn't try to shake it off. I am sure that he was happy to know that his sacrifice would allow you to live. And the way he sealed the Kyuubi inside of you, I am sure he wanted to protect you by giving you a power that he was confident you could master one day. Naruto couldn't help a small smile to form on his face. You're pretty spot on, Hirosenin. So you're calling me that again? Does this mean that you forgive me? Jiraiya asked hopefully. Raising his head again, Naruto met his godfather's worried eyes. He was really afraid to not be forgiven. Well, I'm still a bit mad, so you better train me extra hard to make it up to me, you know. Another sigh of relief this time escaped the Sanin's mouth. Thank you, Gaki. You don't know how much this means to me. Hey, we're family, right? We shouldn't stay mad at each other. Claimed the blonde. Jiraiya smiled brightly at Naruto's statement. Yeah, you're right. We are family. The blonde Jinchuriki returned the smile with one of his own. A true one. He wasn't alone anymore. The tense atmosphere subsided and the two finally relaxed. This time, it was Naruto who told Jiraiya what had happened in his mindscape. He didn't left anything. The Sanin shifted between a mix of amusement and empathy when the blonde told him where he kicked Minato to one of disbelief and worry after he learned what had happened during the fateful night of his birth. He was also amazed that Naruto had a deal with the Kyuubi even though he had yet to truly seal it and he couldn't prevent a few tears from falling when the young boy came to the painful separation with his parents. After taking a few moments to let everything sink in and to allow Naruto time to recompose himself as retelling the events that occurred in his mindscape had brought up again the sorrow he had felt after he had to say goodbye to Minato and Kushina, Jiraiya finally came to a decision. I think you should talk with the fox as soon as possible. Don't let that hanging. See what he wants and what you can get from this truce. I'm worried about those concessions, but it's in his best interest to keep you safe. Naruto wasn't really looking forward to this meeting, but it had to be done. If he wanted to defeat the Akatsuki, Madara, protect his precious people and rescue Sasuke, he would need all the power he could get. He steeled himself and took a determined expression. When should I talk with the Kyuubi? The sooner the better, I think. Answered the Sanin. Then I'll do it right now. Jiraiya locked eyes with his godson, concern written all over his face. You sure? You are about to strike a deal with the most powerful of the Bijk. You might need some preparation for this. Naruto's resolve was absolute. His parents knew he could do it. He wasn't going to back down. It was his nin. He would get the Kyuubi's help, no matter what. With his infamous boisterous attitude, he raised both his fist and his voice. Yeah, I'll do it right now. Believe it. Jiraiya couldn't help but chuckle. The knucklehead's guts and confidence were really something to behold. But it didn't mean that he should just rush like a madman, as he was used to. Alright, but still, be careful, okay? Naruto just flashed a toothy grin and a thumbs up. Don't worry, Hirosenin. That grunchy fox got nothing on me, you know. With that, Naruto sat in the lotus position, closed his eyes and furrowed his brows in concentration. He had never entered his mindscape on his own, it was either in a life or death situation or the previous night. But it couldn't be that difficult. And indeed, the blonde genin felt a pull at the back of his mind. Letting himself get dragged, he suddenly felt like he was jerked out of his sitting position and everything went black for a second. It didn't took him long at all to appear in the familiar sewers. He idly wondered if something could be done about the scenery of his mindscape. It was uglier than a bowl of cold ramen. Feeling the familiar oppressive aura behind him, Naruto turned around and found himself facing the cage of the Kyuubi. The Bijk was looking at him with a thoughtful expression, or at least that's what it looked like to him. At least, it didn't felt like the fox was going to throw up just by thinking about their future cooperation. Baby steps. I didn't expected you here so soon, Ninjin, but I guess it is for the better. We have a lot to discuss. The Kyuubi started. Yep, so we better get started and then go kick that Madara's ass. The blonde shouted. An angry growl was his answer. Idiot. This is Uchiha Madara we are talking about. This man cheated death already and even the Yondaime could only fight him to a standstill. Defeating him will be extremely difficult, even more so with a dimwit like you as my Jinchuriki. The Kyuubi took some deep breath to regain his cool. Not only he had to lower himself and cooperate with a human, which was humiliating for a being as powerful as he was, but he could already tell that there would be a lot of headaches coming his way. My patience is already growing thin, so you are right, let's get started. Alright. Shouted Naruto enthusiastically. So how much chakra will you give me? Before we get to that, let me make some things clear, Ninjin. Replied the Bijk. I hate you. You, your parents, and your village. But I hate Madara even more. We are only cooperating because of the circumstances. I am not your friend and I will never be. However, I will keep my profound disgust for your kind in check for the sake of our common objective. But, in return, I expect you to respect me. I won't be treated like a slave or a simple chakra battery. And, as my Jinchuriki, you represent both of us. And I won't have an idiot as a Jinchuriki. So whatever training your perverted teacher will put you through, you will follow it and learn. I will train you too, because you are too weak and dumb to grasp all the applications of my chakra, and I won't have you complaining about how boring or hard it is. This is part of the concessions I told you about last night. Is that clear? Naruto had expected much worse from the fox. Something like being freed every once in a while to destroy a city. But this was acceptable. Besides, he said that he acknowledged him as his Jinchuriki, right? That had to count for something. Fine by me, said Naruto. But I hope you won't stay grumpy like that all the time. If we need to be partners, we have to learn how to work together, you know. The Kyuubi grumbled. He expected his jailer to want some reciprocated respect. I'll try to be more civilized with you. But no promises. Is that fine, Naruto? The blonde boy grinned before a brief thoughtful look flashed in his eyes, something he never wondered about before came to his mind. Yeah, it's okay for now. But don't you have a name too? For the first time since the beginning of their discussion, an expression different than anger or contempt could be read on the fox's face. He was surprised, genuinely surprised. It was the first time somebody asked his name. Nobody had bothered before. He was either a tool or a threat to be locked away forever. Now that he thought about it, it was the first time, since the sage of the sixth path passed away, that somebody treated him with some kind of common courtesy by simply asking him his name. All in all, it was a pleasant surprise for the Bijk. Not pleasant enough to offset the fact that he had to share his power with his tenant in order to preserve his free will. Why would you want to know that? Isn't Kyuubi enough? That's how humans have called me for thousands of years. Well, if you call me by my name instead of Ninjin like you used to, it's only fair I do the same, right? Retorted Naruto. Your kind doesn't know anything about fairness, the fox growled, but you won't leave me alone until I tell you, right? Yep. Another growl. Was it a good idea to share his name with that worm? It's not like it would kill him. But over the centuries and despite him hating it, his title, Nine-Tailed Demon Fox, had grown as a synonym of devastation. Something he relished to bring upon humans, the ugly weaklings who only saw him and his brethren as weapons and who disrespected daily the dreams and hopes of his father. But now, a human actually wanted to know his name. The Kyuubi figured that he might as well reveal it to Naruto. It would probably make the communication between the two easier. And, after having spent 13 years inside the head of the blonde ninja, he knew how stubborn he was. He would be pestered non-stop until he gave in. Fine, I will tell you. But you will keep it to yourself. Is that clear? Naruto's toothy grin widened. Alright. Now come on, tell me. The fox closed his eyes, seemingly wondering if it was a good idea one last time, before saying the name that he did not heard one time in centuries in a voice surprisingly soft for the Bijk. It was obvious, even for someone as dense as Naruto, that the fox cherished his name. Kurama. The young Jinchuriki's eyes widened a bit upon hearing the Kyuubi's name, and his smile stretched a bit further in the directions of his ears. That's a cool name. He exclaimed, you shouldn't keep it to yourself like that. It sounds better than Kyuubi or Bakujitsune, you know. Kurama was startled. It was the first time that someone qualified something even remotely related to him as cool. But, being who he was, he started to get suspicious. Why are you acting like that? The fox demanded angrily, you know I hate you. You know I almost killed you when your father tried to seal me inside of you and your parents had to shield you from my claw. You know I am only cooperating with you in order to avoid a fate worse than what I'm already condemned to in that damned seal. So why are you acting like you want us to be friends? Is it a ploy to take a bit more power out of me? Naruto flinched after hearing Kurama's angry retort. Yes, he knew that the Bijk hated him, but then again, he seemed to hate everything and everybody, and he also knew of everything that happened during the night of the attack on Konoha. He did resent the fox a bit for what he had tried to do, but then again, Naruto didn't hold grudges. It was pointless. And besides, it was ultimately Madara's fault. So there was no point in staying angry at Kurama forever. If they had to work together, might as well do it on good terms, right? Wishful thinking when the Kyuubi was mentioned. But Naruto was stubborn, as the fox had pointed out. No, that's not it. The blonde answered. It's just that since we are in this together, we should try to be friends, don't you think? Kurama's reaction to that was to erupt in a mocking laughter. Friends? You seriously think we can be friends? Damn, you are even more dumb than I originally thought. You are the first human to ask if I have a name, and this puts you slightly above the rest of your miserable kind, but this doesn't mean that we are friends. I might concede on us being partners, as we will have to fight together in the upcoming years, but friends? Ha. Naruto was saddened and a bit angered after being mocked like that by the Bijk. He hadn't expected Kurama to pump fists with him right away, but at least to be given a chance. But it looked like it wasn't happening. Well, at least I try to be a good guy. You really should try to let go a bit of your hate and anger, you know. Maybe then you wouldn't be treated as a demon all the time. The genin retorted, frowning and crossing his arm on his chest. "You want to talk. I am not the only one who has trouble controlling his anger," Kurama said. Naruto's frown deepened. "Why would I have trouble with my anger? I'm not angry." "Yes, you are, but you repress it. You lie to yourself every day. You won't admit it, but you are angry. There is a colossal amount of repressed fury inside you." The fox enlightened his host. "Your childhood left you deeply affected, Naruto. I know it. I was here all the time. You might think that you managed to pull through and that you can just forget what has been done to you. But the truth is, deep down, you are angry at the villagers of Konoha. But you suppressed your feelings because you wanted to win them over." The blonde's expression immediately shifted from annoyed to anguish. It couldn't be true. Yes, he was not exactly happy about how he was treated back then, but it had changed now. He had friends, he was accepted by the villagers. It was in the past. He had no reason to be angry. "You don't believe me, yet it is true. I admit that you are stronger than the average human. Many would have cracked if they had carried the hatred of a whole village like you did when you were younger. But you weren't left unscathed." He was lying, there was no way someone could keep something like that inside him. He wasn't angry at the civilians of Konoha, he wasn't. He wasn't angry at their whispers, their scorn, their indifference. He wasn't angry at the bullies who always picked on him at the academy, at some of the shopkeepers refusing him into their stores. But just thinking back about it, he couldn't suppress the slight flickers of rage in his heart. He never really thought back on his childhood. There was no point, it was over. But Kurama's words brought those memories back. And now that they were back, he couldn't deny what the fox stated. Despite himself, despite his happy-go-lucky attitude, despite his smiles, real or fake, Uzumaki Naruto, deep down, was full of resentment. And it scared him. Kurama sensed his distress. In another situation, he would have been delighted to see his Jinchuriki in turmoil, as he was right now. But right now, he needed him to be focused. "Stop moping, Naruto. Yes, you have a lot of suppressed anger inside of you. Everyone does. But in your case, this could prove either beneficial or lethal." The last remark caught Naruto's attention and drove him out of his dark thoughts. "What do you mean? My anger could kill me?" "Yes, because you are a Jinchuriki," answered the fox. "We Bijk are beings made of chakra and as such, everything we do or feel influence our power. Particularly our emotions. Don't you remember when you were on that mission in the Land of Waves, the fight against the Ice-style user who had seemingly killed the Uchiha brat? You were beyond angry at this point and you tapped into my chakra subconsciously." Naruto did remember the fight on Tezuna's bridge, nearly a year ago. He had wanted Haku dead during this battle, and he had felt a surge of power after Sasuke had fell into a death-like state. "So when I'm really pissed, I use your chakra without knowing?" he asked. "Yes, and that's why your repressed feelings could end up being your doom," Kurama answered. "If one day somebody or something really pushes you over the edge, you might snap. And the angrier you feel, the more of my power will be channeled into your body. And as you gain power, you lose your control over me. That is what happened last night." Naruto blanched and then tried to reassure himself. "Yeah, but you said you wouldn't try to take control of me, right? So it's okay." Unfortunately, Kurama was bad at reassuring people. "I won't try to possess you willingly. But this, I cannot prevent." "What?" shrieked the spiky-haired boy, "what do you mean? You won't try to take over, but you will take over? That doesn't make any goddamn sense." "Shut up and let me finish, idiot," roared the fox. "I already told you, I am made of chakra and as such, it carries over my emotions. And since I am a concentration of hatred and anger, you will be affected by it too when you'll use my strength." Naruto was starting to feel a mix of frustration, panic and impatience. "So what do I do? There is not even a point to become partners if I can't use your chakra. Simple. Whatever you have bottled up inside, you let it out. You already did it with your father and your teacher. I'm not telling you to go around your village and yelling or beating the villagers, even though it would please me if you did, but just to admit that what you had to go through was unfair," Kurama said. Lowering his head, the blonde thought back of all the memories he thought he had buried in the deepest corner of his mind. That time when 3 bullies had given him a beating just because he wanted to be Hokage in front of the academy. That time when a family had just passed in front of him when he was eating ramen on a bench and the father had told his son not to associate with him. That time when he was thrown out of a shop because he had looked at the mask displayed on the shelves and the people walking in the streets had stopped just to watch him with indifference or contempt. Even some bad memories of his friends came to the front of his mind. When Kiba would mock his lack of talent in the clone technique. When Sasuke would humiliate him in front of the class. When Ino would laugh at him because of his orange clothes. When he would get hit by Sakura when he asked her on a date. He even thought about the Sandaime. The man had lied to him about his parents and, while he had done what he thought was the best for him, he had failed and in the end, even though his status as a Jinchuriki was never revealed to the younger generation, the hate of their parents surely was passed on. But that didn't matter, not anymore. Yes, he had a crappy childhood and he wouldn't just try to ignore it anymore. He had a right to be angry. He might even be entitled to claim revenge. But he wouldn't walk that path. Naruto wasn't one to hold grudges. He wouldn't give in to hatred like Sasuke. The young Uchiha was living in the past, unable to move on until his brother was dead. And for this one objective, he had forsaken his friends and his village. But the Uzumaki wasn't like that. He was turned towards the future. You know, you're right, I am angry. Or rather, I should be angry. Started Naruto, but that would be the easy way. I can't just forget what I had to go through. But I can move past that. I can forgive. Maybe it was painful, but it also got me where I am today. That's where I got my nin from. I won't just give in to my darkness like that. I'll master your chakra Kurama and I won't lose control. Believe it. The fox looked at Izunchi with surprise once again. He had underestimated him. Maybe this runt was slightly worthy of using what he had reluctantly accepted to share with him. If your resolve is that strong, then maybe you'll go somewhere. Now that this is out of the way, we should go back to what you came here for. Naruto rubbed the back of his head in a sheepish way. His stroll down memory lane had momentarily made him forget why he was talking with Kurama in the first place. Yeah, you're right. So, you'll give me your chakra then? You also said something about gifts, right? I didn't expect you to remember about that, but yes. Beside my chakra, there are two of my abilities that I am willing to share with you. Consider yourself honored, Naruto. Even Uzumaki Mito, the wife of the Shodai Hokage, could only master one of those two on her own. Said Kurama in a solemn tone. Cool. Naruto was ecstatic. He would receive jutsus from one of the most powerful being on earth. He was so excited that he completely forgot for a moment their previous conversation. His anger issue could wait. He had Kika's techniques to learn. The first of my abilities is the negative emotion sensing. It allows me to feel any negative emotion such as hatred, anger, fear, lust, deceit or killing intent from any living being around me. Explained the Bijk. Huh, that's all? Asked Naruto. He was a bit disappointed. He expected something like the ability to shoot laser beams or to move at the speed of light. Your idiocy knows no limit, does it? Growled Kurama. It would allow you to identify any imposters, see through lies, or even catch a traitor among your peers. Coming from me, it might sound surprising, but brute strength isn't always the best option. It is better to prevent a disaster than to deal with it after it happened, don't you think? Now, that sounded better for the blonde knucklehead. When you put it like that, it sounds great. Don't expect to master it right away. You will most likely only sense killing intent and hatred at the beginning, and only if the feeling is strong. Warned the fox. Naruto flashed a confident smile at the Bijk. I'll have it in my pocket in no time, Kurama, believe it. Now tell me, what's the other one? The fox sighed. He preferred the thoughtful Uzumaki over the hot-headed one. He was quickly getting on his nerves. But at least, he was motivated. My second ability is directly linked to my chakra. You won't be able to master it if you can't handle my power. Started Kurama, some Bijk have an affinity towards an element. You saw that the Ichibi can manipulate sand. In a similar manner, the Yanbi and the Gunbai can conjure lava and steam respectively. Steam? So ignoring his Jinchuriki's important, at least, in any Uzumaki's mind, question, Kurama continued. I, however, can manipulate raw chakra better than any of them. I can even separate a tail worth of it from me and manipulate it to create a brand new entity with its own techniques. Those entities are called the Nine Masked Beasts. They are a sort of mix between your shadow clones and your summons. They come from me, but are different at the same time. Naruto's eyes widened in awe. He could have another summon available beside the toads. That was more like it. It sounded better than the negative emotion sensing to him. It was a tangible technique that could kick someone's butt. Exactly what he liked. Awesome. When do I learn that? He asked, or more like shouted. Never. You can't learn to do that. Stated Kurama flatly. The face Naruto made was the best imitation ever made by a human being of a puppy who just got kicked by its owner. But why did you mention it, then? Because you won't be the one creating them, Naruto. I will. However, I could give you the ability to summon them. However, there is a problem with that. Answered the fox. The spiky-haired boy groaned. There was something preventing him from using the Kikbi's power. Again. What is it this time? I won't turn into a psycho just for that, even if your jutsu sounds awesome, you know. The problem is that you already signed a summoning contract. After having spent roughly 80 years sealed inside two Uzumaki seal masters, I picked up one thing or two out of Kenjutsu. On top of being used to bind my kind inside humans in a literal sense, it can also bind two beings, or group of beings, with each other, in a more abstract sense. Okay, so it has something to do with seals, muttered Naruto. He had never been one for theoretical explanations. He preferred practice. The summoning contract functions like that. Continued Kurama, either not noticing or caring that he had just lost his container. By using your blood to sign the contract, it binds you to a certain animal clan, and in return, they lend you their assistance. In return, you do not seek help from other summoned creatures, and you assist them should the need arise. I could create a summoning contract inside this mindscape that would bind me to you, and as a result, my creations. And before you get funny ideas, Kurama warned a confused Naruto, it would be impossible to summon me outside, and the 9 masked beasts wouldn't be at their full power because of the Haki no Fukin. But before that, you'd need to break your contract with the toads. What? So I can't have both the toads and your funky clones? Asked Naruto in an alarmed voice. That was a tough choice to make. The 9 masked beasts sounded awesome, but he liked the toads, even if Gamabunta was not the friendliest amphibian around. And the toads had been his father's summons too. On the other hand, signing this contract with Kurama could be a way to strengthen their ability to cooperate. It was a part of the Bijk's power, and he was set on mastering it in order to protect Konoha. But he also suspected that his godfather wouldn't be too happy to learn that he had dumped the summons he had taught him to call at his side. How was he supposed to decide? I am not forcing you to decide right now. Discuss it with your perverted teacher. Said Kurama. We are not finished on the terms of our alliance. Glad to have a distraction, if only momentarily, Naruto gazed expectantly at his tenant. He had personally nothing to ask. As long as the Bijk stayed on his side, he was happy. I'll do it quick. Began the fox. I will allow you to use my chakra as you see fit in battle. But only if you have no other choice, or if you are facing the Akatsuki or Madara. You will have to call for me eventually, but I expect you to grow strong on your own. I won't have a weakling as my Jinchuriki, as I already mentioned. It is part of my concessions. There are only 2 more. Only 2? I expected much worse from you, Kurama. Teased Naruto. Those 2 are the more important. Firstly, I expect you to kill Madara. You have a tendency to talk to your opponents to make them change their ways, like you did with Zabuza and Gaara. I won't have any of that with the Uchiha. I want to see him dead at your feet. Is that clear? Demanded the fox menacingly. The blonde genin nodded grimly. He knew that Madara wasn't up to something good and that he wouldn't have any qualms in killing him. He was behind the death of his parents. But still, taking a life wasn't something he was looking forward to. Satisfied by Naruto's silent answer, Kurama continued. Secondly, I want my yin chakra back. Huh? Your what chakra? Asked the Uzumaki. The Kyuubi could already see the massive headache coming his way with all the dumbed-down explanations and frustrations his container put him through today. My yin chakra. You do not seem to remember, too. I will explain it again. Your father mentioned that he only sealed half of my chakra inside of you. My yang chakra, to be precise. My yin half, he sealed it inside himself before being caught in the dead demon-consuming seal. I want you to find a way to retrieve it so I can be whole again. Besides, it would allow you to get more power from me. Kurama clarified. The blonde was a bit skeptical. Sure, they were allied, but he did not trust the Bijk yet. If I accept, you swear you won't try anything against me or my friends, right? The fox growled in indignation. Just because he was a walking disaster didn't mean he would break a deal like that. Particularly one that was meant to protect him. I have some honor too, you know. More than some humans. I won't try to break out of the seal. At least, until Madara is dead. I swear this on the sage of the 6 Path's name. He said solemnly. Naruto didn't who was that 6 Path guy, but he could tell that Kurama wasn't lying. Flashing his tenant a toothy grin, along with a nice guy pose, the blonde was more than happy to finally seal the deal with the Kyuubi. Then, from now on, we are partners. He exclaimed excitedly. Even Kurama couldn't help a small smile from forming on his lips. Sure, the knucklehead was annoying, but it was the first time that he would get to truly share his powers, rather than having them forcefully taken from him. And if that meant he would get to see Madara dead, it was worth it. The following years would be interesting indeed. If you insist on putting it like that, I guess we are. Jiraiya was starting to get impatient. It had been a while since Naruto had fallen in a state of whatever Jinchuriki fell in when they were in their mindscape. He had noticed that the blonde's face had twitched every now and then, displaying several emotions, between sadness, anger, and happiness. While his godson was having a chat with the Kyuubi, the Toad Sage was busy thinking about what kind of training he would put Naruto through. Obviously, given the new circumstances, he would have to make it more intense. He had thought about an old application of the Kage Bunshin that might help them speed it up. The first thing on Jiraiya's list was to make Naruto go through the basis all over again, from chakra control to taijutsu, jinjutsu and ninjutsu practice and theories. He knew that his godson would never be able to use most jinjutsu techniques due to his large chakra reserve and poor control, and that trying to teach him only one taijutsu style wouldn't give Bear good results, given the blonde's unpredictable nature and his habits of thinking of a strategy or striking on the fly. Some basic knowledge wouldn't hurt him, far from it. That didn't mean he would neglect working his body. Many people thought that Minato was as fast as he was because he was born like that, but in truth his swiftness and lightning-fast reflexes came from years and years of intense workout. And Jiraiya would put his godson through the exact same torture that his father had been. It was certain that Naruto would excel in ninjutsu. Being a Jinchuriki gave him unparalleled stamina and fast recovery, perfect for shooting multiple strong jutsu repeatedly. Jiraiya would have to check his chakra affinity, but he had a hunch that it was wind, like Minato and Kushina. He would also need to perfect his Rasengan and eventually learn the variations or come with new ones on his own. The Toad Sage also thought that Genjutsu would be a good asset to Naruto's arsenal. He was in Uzumaki, after all, and it would give him some sort of connection to his old clan. It might be something hard to teach the hyperactive blonde as it required patience and focus, but his mother had the same temperament and yet she had been as good, if not better than Jiraiya in the arts of sealing. Then, of course, came his speciality, the toads. It was a bit eerie for Sage Mode, as he needed a more mature body to handle the natural energy, but the collaboration techniques could be remarkably effective if used correctly. Naruto had a lot to learn, but Jiraiya was confident. If his godson was one thing, it was determined. He would pull through easily and ask for more. The Sannin was pulled out of his throes when he heard the blonde boy's grunting. He was finally coming out of his trance, and the sage was impatient to know how Naruto's talk with his inner demon went. "Welcome back, Gaki." He greeted his awakening student. "So, the old fox wasn't too hard on you, I hope. You managed to strike a deal." Shaking his head to get rid of the slight dizziness of coming out of his mindscape, Naruto turned towards Jiraiya and gave him a thumbs up. "You bet, Hiro Sennin. I have a new partner now." The Sannin smiled proudly at his godson. "Trust in Uzumaki to make the impossible possible." "Good, now don't leave me hanging, what happened in that thick head of yours?" Groaning slyly at light jab, Naruto proceeded to go over his conversation with Kurama, not letting out anything. And for the second time today, Jiraiya was shifting between different reactions as his godson was speaking. He was impressed with his bravery in front of the Kyuubi, saddened by his painful reminiscence of his childhood, and proud of his resolution to master the Bijk's chakra. However, when he heard about the Kumonjik and the fact that Naruto needed to cancel his partnership with the Toads in order to gain the ability to summon them, he couldn't hold back an indignified shout of protestation. "Wait a minute. You are actually considering signing this contract with the Fox?" Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Yeah, I figured you would react like that. But you gotta admit that his summons sound awesome. I really like the Toads, but I want to master all of the Kyuubi's abilities. And maybe it will help us communicate or something, you know." "Have you forgotten that Minato was a Toad summoner too?" said Jiraiya angrily. "If I recall, it was Gamabunta who saved your ass from the Ichibi during the invasion, right? And there are a lot of things you could learn from them, such as Senjutsu. I really don't think that's a good idea." "Senjutsu? What's that?" Naruto asked. Anything ending with jutsu got his rapt attention. "The art of using natural energy to strengthen your body and chakra," exclaimed the Toad Sage proudly. "It allows you to enter Sage Mode, where all of your senses are magnified, your Taijutsu and Ninjutsu tremendously stronger. The epitome of awesomeness." Naruto had stars in his eyes. If the Toads had that, screw the masked beasts. The Toads are not the only one knowledgeable in manipulating natural energy. The blonde heard the familiar deep voice of Kurama say in his head. "Wait a minute, how can you talk to me out of my mindscape?" he asked out loud. "What are you talking about, Gaki? Is the fox giving you problems?" said Jiraiya. "He just talked to me," Naruto exclaimed. "Of course I did, idiot. Your father left the seal a bit more loose after he left. It allows me to speak to you even when we are not in front of each other. You can just think to reply to me, I'll hear it and it will be less awkward for the people around you," Kurama retorted in an annoyed tone. "Oh, alright, wait, you said you knew about this age thing." "No," clarified the fox, "but I know quite a bit about natural energy, as I said. To be honest, my chakra was originally coming from nature before I was whatever, this is not the time for a story. But I already witnessed a Senjutsu user in action before and he wasn't a Toad summoner." "Who was it?" asked Naruto. "Senju Hashirama, the Shodai Hokage. After he defeated Madara, he used it, combined with his wood style, to subdue me in order to let his wife Mito seal me inside herself. It was quite impressive, to be honest." "Oh, so I could learn it somewhere else. Perhaps. Maybe there are notes about it in the old Senju compound. So I could get both that sage thing and the masked beasts," the blonde thought. He jolted when he felt someone poke his cheek, only to find that it was Jiraiya, who looked quite exasperated. "Quit spacing out like that when I'm talking to you, Gaki," the sage said annoyed. "I wasn't spacing out," the blonde replied loudly. "I was talking with the Kyuubi. He said that there were other way to learn Sage Mode, like the Shodai Hokage did." Jiraiya facepalmed in frustration. "I thought you let that go. You still want to summon those whatever they are called. And beside, even if there are actually other way to learn senjutsu, doing it alone would be extremely dangerous. Even with the Toad Elder's help, it was risky. Well, if you know it already, you could give me tips to make it less dangerous. Naruto retorted. The Sannin blinked. He hadn't thought about that. But still, the Toad summoning contract was a sort of heirloom, and he wanted someone to take his role of Toad Sage when he retired or died. I still think it's a bad idea, Gaki. The Toads are among the most powerful summons. Jiraiya said almost pleadingly. Naruto was a bit saddened at hearing the tone of his godfather. But if he really wanted to cooperate with Kurama, he would need the Kumonji. And now that there was a possibility he could learn Sage Mode on his own, the choice felt easier. Is he implying that a summoned creature the mighty nine-tailed demon fox, wouldn't be able to match against a dirty frog? This is very insulting. Growled the Bijk in the young Uzumaki's mind. Well, Gamabunta is really strong. Didn't he immobilize you when you were under Madara's control? And he helped me against Gaara too. Naruto asked, knowing that it would piss his tenant off. Do not mention that night again. Said Kurama menacingly. Nodding mentally, the blonde returned his focus on Jiraiya. Come on Iro-sennin, it's the fox that creates them. They should be plenty strong. And if I really need to work with him, I should learn from him too. What about the whole those who abandon their comrades or worse than trash thing you had going? Aren't the Toads your comrades? The Sannin retorted. Of course I considered that. I'm friends with Gamakichi and Gamatatsu. But now, even if I don't really like it and he probably doesn't too, the Kikbi is my comrade. It pains me to cancel my contract with the Toads, but if signing that contract with the Fox allows me to be strong enough to protect everyone I care about from whatever Madara wants to do with the Bijk, then I'll do it. And even if I am not allowed to summon the Toads anymore, I'll still consider them my comrades, and I'll protect them too. Sighing dejectedly, Jiraiya looked with an air of defeat at his apprentice. You won't change your mind, won't you? He asked. Naruto nodded vigorously. Another sigh. Fine. Do it then. I guess I'll have to find someone else to carry the torch of the Toad Sage. The guild card won't work on me, you know. I'm still a bit mad at you. The Sannin shrugged. Worth a try. After yet another trip in his mindscape to sign the freshly created contract of Kurama, Naruto got up from his sleeping bag and was now standing in what used to be the court of the ancient keep they were camping in, listening to the Kikbi's instruction. I won't repeat myself, Naruto, so listen well. Well, it is true that you can summon the masked beasts after you signed that contract, you won't be able to use the regular summoning technique. Why not? Asked the blonde confusedly. Because it is a ninjutsu technique. The way I am creating the masked beasts is through the use of a long-lost art created by the most powerful man to ever live, the ninja. Before you ask me what it is, I'll tell you that it is the precursor of ninjutsu. It was meant to bring and maintain peace, but mankind corrupted it and used it to wage war. Oh, so what kind of technique should I use? I have an idea. Listen carefully and repeat what I'm about to tell you. Giving an attentive ear to his tenant, Naruto closed his eyes in concentration, memorizing the formula Kurama was teaching him. He asked for a second recitation before being confident enough Jiraiya. Even though he still felt that the Toads were more useful than the 9 masked beasts, he was still curious to see them. 9 mask SVH started Naruto, Sei, Byaku, Shu, Gen, KK, Nan, Hoku, San, Jyoku 9 masked beasts. As he was calling each nin symbol, a massive mandala, composed of 9 kanji encircled by 9 rings formed behind him. And from each ring, a form started to appear. After they were fully materialized, they dropped in front of their summoner. Opening his eyes after hearing the soft noise their landing produced, Naruto was excited to finally see masked beasts, as he was impatient to admire his new summons. But all he saw were 9 masked foxes. 9 masked fox kits. Tiny fox kits. Confusion. Disappointment. Frustration. Anger. What the fuck, Kurama? I ditched the Toads for those lame-ass puppies. Calm down, Naruto. This is their original appearance. The fox said calmly. Take a look at their combat form. Suddenly, smoke erupted around each of the kits. And when it dissipated, the kits were nowhere to be found. In their places were a dragon bearing a likeness to a seahorse, a massive yet slender white tiger, a huge and elegant bird, large enough to be rode on, a tortoise with an armored shell, a long snake with golden scales, a woman with an angelic aspect and garments with translucent ribbons attached to her arms, floating above the ground and on which Jiraiya was already drooling on, shamelessly looking at her generous curves, a cloaked figure looking like a skeleton, armed with a massive scythe, who was levitating too, and 2 similar-looking priests, wearing rich robes and leaning on fox staves. Even in these much more impressive forms, the masked beasts kept their kitsune masks. Isn't that better? Asked Kurama with barely concealed pride in his creations. They each have their own names: Sarek, Azure Dragon, Ayako, White Tiger, Suzaku, Vermilion Bird, Genbu, Black Tortoise, Kinja, Golden Snake, Tenyo, Celestial Maiden, Shinigami, Death God, Hakuto Senin, Northern Sage, and Nanto Senin, Southern Sage. They are the 9 masked beasts, the 9 aspects of the 9-tailed demon fox. Now this, Naruto had to admit, looked cool. His new summons were badass. Even Jiraiya was impressed. It was not every day that you was that kind of technique. He also noticed that it was not a ninjutsu that his pupil had used. The Sannin was really intrigued now. Awesome. With this I'll totally plow the Akatsuki and Orochimaru's ass, save Sasuke, and protect Konoha. The blonde shouted to the sky. Before you continue on how awesome you are, said Kurama, I should tell you more about their abilities. The first 5 ones, the divine beasts, or mostly for physical attacks. Sarek and Byako are extremely fast and strong. Suzaku, of course, can fly and produce waves of wind from his wings. Genbu can withstand extremely strong blows and is excellent to shield you. Ninja can bury himself and bind his target with his body. The 4 other ones, the divine priests, can use chakra-based techniques. Tenyo can bind or even seal her prey with her ribbons. Shinigami can shoot waves of energy with his scythe that drain the chakra of whatever they pass through. Both he and Tenyo can also fly, but not as fast as Suzaku. Ikuto and Nanto Senin have the same powers. They can create chakra barriers to either protect or trap their target. Yeah. Awesome. Yelled Naruto again, before relaying to Jiraiya everything he had learned about the masked beasts. The sage had to admit that they were powerful summons, but he was especially intrigued by the fact that they were conjured through ninja rather than ninjutsu. He decided to keep his curiosity for later, however. Now was the time to begin their training. Alright, Naruto. Dispel your summons. It's time we seriously started on why we are here for in the first place, don't you think? This one sentence managed to make the blonde even more excited. Finally, training. I'm warning you, what I had originally planned for you was hard. But after everything we learned since yesterday, I'm sure you will agree that we need to step it up a notch. Said Jiraiya with a serious expression. Now wasn't the time to be goofing around. He had a godsend to torture. I'm going to put you through hell several times. Are you ready for this? With a confident grin, Naruto pumped his fist up before he looked like he remembered something very important. Yeah sure, but first, yes. Where's my jumpsuit? Oh, how Jiraiya rubbed the back of his head in a similar fashion his godson would have, while avoiding his questioning eyes. Hamakinda burned to ashes when you know along with your hit I ate. But Naruto started, dramatic tears already starting to form. It was so cool. Where will I find another as dashing as that one? And my hit I ate it was a gift from Iruka-sensei. And that's how the training regimen of Uzumaki Naruto began, with the mighty Jiraiya of the Sannin trying to comfort his weeping godson, promising to buy him a new jumpsuit in the next town they would enter and a new hit I ate once they were back in Konoha. Disclaimer. Nope, still not owning Naruto. It was a cloudy evening in Land of Mountains, making the small country seem even more sad than it already was. 30 years ago, it was in the arid mountains of this small nation that the hidden village of Kajrum was located before it was destroyed by an enemy that was never identified, even though it was widely believed that the attack came from Iowa. But no proof were ever found in the ashes of Kajrum. And it was in this coldy day that 2 peculiar figures were making their way down one of the small and rocky roads of Land of Mountains. One was easily identified as the Toad Sage, Jiraiya, still wearing the same type of clothes and still keeping his white hair in an unruly mane. The other one, however, might not be as easily recognized. The second traveler was a teenager who couldn't be older than 14. He had spiky and unkempt blonde hair, bright blue eyes, sun-kissed skin, and 3 curious marks on each cheek, reminiscent of whiskers. He was wearing a black long-sleeved jacket with a red whirlpool symbol on the back and a white swirl with a tassel on the left side, gray pants with a shuriken holster tied to his right leg, and black shinobi boots. His whole outfit was obviously brand new, as it lacked any signs of long-time use. Of course, this blonde teenager was none other than Uzumaki Naruto. And, in the 1.5 years he had spent on the road with his godfather, he had grown up, physically and mentally. He wasn't small anymore. In fact, as far as his height was concerned, puberty had been good to him. He was now slightly taller than the average 14-year-old boy. And his jacket concealed a well-toned body that he had acquired after countless hours of the harshest physical training the Toad Sage could deliver. But beside his growth spur, it was his mental development that might surprise his peers back in Konoha. While he was still his happy-go-lucky usual self, it felt somewhat toned down and yet more genuine, as if an exaggerated mask had been thrown away and replaced with a more restrained but truthful attitude. And indeed, Naruto, after his talk with the Kikbi, had let go of the facade he had put up to keep his worst memories and emotions away. Even intellectually, as surprising as it would seem, Naruto had made some progress. He actually thought, if only for a short time, before acting. He also learned to stay put and focus for longer period of times as his training in Kenjutsu required. Speaking of the sealing arts, Jiraiya was quite pleased with his students' progress. It had been difficult at the start, but when the sage had told his godson that a great deal of Minato's power, particularly his most powerful technique, the Flying Thunder God, came from his mastery in Kenjutsu, and that his mother's clan, the Uzumaki, were renowned as the greatest seal masters in history, the blonde's interest and motivation in learning were significantly raised up. However, it was hard to appreciate the blonde's growing maturity as he was currently brooding childishly and making grimaces while looking at his new clothes. "I don't like them." Jiraiya massaged his temples in frustration. But he wouldn't budge. If Naruto was to be a true shinobi and he was well on his way to become one, he might as well look like one. "Come on, stop it already. Even the Kikbi agrees with me. In fact, I'm pretty sure he prefers to have a good-looking Jinchuriki rather than a fool begging to be killed by wearing bright clothes. I agree with the pervert, for once. At least you look somewhat professional like this." "But," yelled Naruto, who looked like a spoiled princess who didn't receive a pony for her birthday, "those clothes have no orange on them." "Orange is not suited for your profession, idiot," said Kurama, annoyed at his container's constant whining. "You're one to talk, you're orange." "Stupid fox," retorted the young Uzumaki. "I can't help it, you pathetic mongrel. That's the color of my fur. And besides, even if I was of a less noticeable tint, I'm still as tall as a hill. How do you expect to remain hidden in the shadows looking like a shining carrot?" This was one thing that didn't change much. Naruto and Kurama's relationship never went past strict partnership. Not that the blonde never tried to be the fox's friend. But the bitch really didn't want any of it even though he had warmed up just a little bit. "Well, I managed to escape the Anbu when I was little," answered Naruto. Really, he had managed well until now, wearing orange. So why was everyone against him like that? "If you want to be taken seriously as a ninja, Naruto, you have to look like one too," said Jiraiya. "And, seriously, if you keep wearing orange, you'll never catch a girl. No woman would ever want to date a guy wearing the eyesore you called a jumpsuit." Meanwhile, in Konoha, in the Hika compound, a certain blue-haired girl had a sudden urge to sneeze, which she just so happened to do right in her cousin's face as they were sparring. Back in the land of mountains, Naruto muttered curses before finally relenting, to the relief of both Jiraiya and Kurama. "Fine, fine. No more orange on my shinobi clothes, but when I'm off duty, I'll wear what I want. Meh, whatever. If this is what it takes to make you stop being an annoying little gaki, fine," said the Sannin. They continued to walk in silence for a bit, occupying themselves in different fashion. Naruto took out several dried leaves from his pouch, practicing nature transformations with them. He alternatively tried to split them in two, burn them to small piles of ashes, or make them wet. Jiraiya was pleased when they had found that, indeed, Naruto shared both Minato and Kushina's affinities for wind, but also had a talent for fire ninjutsu, and even, quite surprisingly, for water. The Toad Sage didn't know many wind and water techniques, beside the basic ones, but he was very knowledgeable with fire, being an expert in the art of using it himself, and having been trained by the Sandaime Hokage. Jiraiya, on his part, was currently busy thinking about a steamy scene that he had been thinking about for 3 days, and that he absolutely wanted to write down as soon as possible. Just because you were training your godson to face a group of S-rank Nukenin didn't mean that you couldn't continue to bless the world with your divine romances. Luckily for the super pervert, they were nearing a small town called Yamatsuri. However, he also remembered the situation of the country they were in and decided to warn his apprentice. "Naruto, before we enter this town, you should be aware that Yama no Kuni is currently barely more than an outpost for the village of Iowa. There is a very high probability that we will run into some rock shinobi. I know, I should keep a low profile or even use a henge, right?" the blonde asked. It was painfully obvious, as he was growing up, that Naruto looked like Minato. If his head was less round and his hair longer, he could easily pass for a clone of a teenager Yondaime Hokage, minus the whiskers. Jiraiya nodded, pleased that his student had understood immediately. "Yes. Patrols are frequent in these parts. Yamatsuri is a very small town, so they will quickly notice any strangers. Focus on your sensory ability, just in case." Naruto hadn't just progressed in elemental ninjutsu and genjutsu, he also made progress with Kurama's power. He quickly learned how to use the negative emotion sensing, he could more or less turn it on or off to avoid being overwhelmed by other people's hatred or anger if there were too many of them. He wasn't able to sense all kind of emotions on the same degree, as it was easier to sense hatred and killing intent than deceit or sorrow. The blonde closed his eyes in concentration for a second, allowing his senses to expand. It was a really weird experience to feel other people's emotions, and Naruto couldn't really describe it. He wasn't able to determine the origin of the emotion. If he sensed hatred, he wasn't able to determine towards who or what it was directed, but he could feel its intensity. Sensing killing intent was much easier too, even if it was repressed, meaning that sneaking up on Naruto while he was focusing on his ability was extremely hard. Finally entering the small town, Jiraiya and his apprentice immediately started looking for an inn. As they were walking in the main street, the young Uzumaki was able to witness the obvious state of poverty and the gloomy, sad atmosphere of the country. The walls of the houses were in an advanced state of decay, the road was dirty, littered with broken glass and other substances he really didn't want to identify. Beggars were trying to keep the cold wind coming from the mountains away with their rags and torn blankets, and the few people outside were all looking down. It reminded Naruto of the land of waves, before the island was freed from Gaten. Seeing such misery made him angry, but he knew that this time, he couldn't help them. Bringing attention to him, when he was so close of a Wagakure, would be suicidal. It also made him think of the trap master Gem. The old man used to be a Kagurame shinobi, and he had wanted to blow up Konoha using a vast chain of explosive tag planted all around the village. Naruto remembered that it was only because he had reminded the trap master of his son that they avoided a disaster. Nonetheless, the man had a good heart despite his desire of retribution, and seeing the state of land of mountains with his own eyes gave him a better understanding of Gen's motivation. As a small inn finally came into view, the young Uzumaki suddenly sensed something that made him sick to his stomach. Something he only ever had sensed coming from Jiraiya, but never in such quantity or radiating with such evil intent. This foreign and horrid feeling almost made him throw up. Noticing his pupil's distress, the toad sage turned to face him and was about to ask if he was okay when a scream of terror and despair was heard coming from inside the inn. And, with that scream, new emotions flooded Naruto's mind. Fear and disgust. Just as the young Jinchuriki was about to enter the building and stop whatever was happening inside, two shinobi from Iowa, if their red and brown uniform and their hit I-8 was anything to go by, exited the inn, dragging a middle-aged woman behind them. She was obviously frightened, but her cries for mercy were not for her. Please. Stop him. Don't let him use my daughter like that. The shorter of the two ninja, a brown-haired man with a bulky build, only smirked before slapping the innkeeper, shutting her and making her lose her balance. What are you complaining about? We paid graciously to sleep in this shithole you call an inn. It's only fair that we get to have a little fun while we're here, don't you think? Holding her bruised cheek, the innkeeper shakily stood up, tears streaming down her face. Anything but that, please. Not my daughter. I'll let you do it to me instead. But please. Not my kid. The other shinobi, a tall and slender man with dark red hair, laughed lecherously after hearing the woman's plight. Heh, don't worry, you'll have your turn. You're quite well conserved for your age, you know. Maybe after our squad leader let us get our share of your daughter, we'll give you a good time too. I ain't gonna wait any longer. Protested the bulky ninja. Removing his belt, he started to approach the crying woman when he suddenly noticed Jiraiya and Naruto staring at them. Move along, you two. We're only getting our reward for patrolling around the pile of shit you call a country. The Sannin was enraged. He may have been a womanizer and a shameless pervert, but he still, somewhat, respected women. If there was one thing in this world that he hated, it was rapists. And the intentions of those Iowa shinobi were pretty clear. He was about to jump in defense of the innkeeper before he was stopped dead in his tracks. Jiraiya, along with the two ninja, were suddenly hit by the thickest killing intent they ever felt. The toad sage immediately where it was coming from, but before he could react, his godson vanished in a red blur. Naruto had never felt so angry. He could feel his insides burning with a mixture of rage and hatred. Growing up shunned by a whole village gave the young Uzumaki a strong dislike for injustice and bullies. He could not tolerate people who harmed others for their own amusement or gain. And what he was seeing and sensing was on a whole other level than what he ever encountered in his short ninja career. Naruto had almost no experience in all matters of a sexual nature, considering who was training him, it was quite a feat, but even him could understand what was going on. He was too angry to notice the chakra shroud forming on his own, with 9 tails wildly whipping the air behind him. Before Jiraiya could stop him, he used a short-range body flicker to appear right in front of the bulky Iwanin. And, before he or his companion could react, Naruto used one of the wind jutsu he had created. Stretching out his right arm, already coated with a wild mass of chakra, he swift it at his target, roaring the name of his technique with an altered voice. Beast Wave Palm. The bulky Iowa shinobi was too slow to react, and the wave of wind chakra bisected him neatly, showering Naruto, the innkeeper and the other Iwanin with blood. The would-be rapist, seeing his teammate killed in such a gruesome way, quickly went through a series of hand signs before the furious Jinchuriki could tear him apart too. Earth style. Mud wall. Naruto rushed towards the remaining shinobi, but before he could reach him, a wall made out of damp dirt emerged from the ground, stopping him in his momentum. But, before the Iwanin could escape by using the hidden mole technique, the blonde Uzumaki charged one of his signature techniques, now fully able to do it one-handed and overcharged by Kurama's chakra, and slammed it against the earth wall, blowing it apart. Rasengan. The Iwanin was thrown away by the power behind the explosion and collided violently against a wall, leaving a dent in it. Before he could pick himself up and try to flee, Naruto flickered above him, a foot pressed on his stomach, preventing him from moving. And, for the first time, the Iwanin had a good look at the blonde's face. His gentle blue eyes were gone, replaced by slitted blood-red orbs, glowing with power and malice. His whiskers were bolder and darker, accentuating his feral features. His teeth were now fangs, picking out between his blackened lips. His nails had become sharp claws, directed at the Iwanin's throat. But that was not what almost made the Doton user soil himself in sheer terror. No, it was the sadistic and triumphant smirk that seemed so alien on the blonde's face, as well as the colossal killing intent focused solely on the helpless shinobi. It was true that Naruto could stay in control when he used a certain amount of Kurama's chakra, but that didn't mean that he wasn't affected in some way. He was much more aggressive, and his animalistic instincts went on overdrive. And right now, the Iwanin was merely a prey to be killed, a toy to be shred, a nuisance to be annihilated. And the Jinchuriki did just that, with a quick whip of his claws, the head of the unlucky Iwa shinobi was sliced beyond recognition. Just as Naruto finished his second opponent, cries of pain and distress could be heard again coming from inside the inn. Not wasting any second, the blonde Jinchuriki rushed inside, set on reducing to ashes whoever was the cause of those cries and the horrible lust he could still sense. And just as he passed the door, he was immediately overcome with pity, disgust, and even more rage and hatred. Lying on the floor, stark naked and covered in nothing but what smelled like low-cost sake and bodily fluids, was a girl who couldn't be more than 2 years older than Naruto. Her long black hair were spread around her, tears were streaming down her face, and yet, her gray eyes didn't seem sad. They were lifeless, dull, showing how broken her aggressor had left her. Standing next to her was said aggressor, wearing the same uniform as his dead teammates. He had a slender yet muscular build, short ash-colored hair, and deep green eyes. His face was a bit flushed, and some beads of sweat were running down his forehead. He was just finishing buttoning his pants and was about to call his companions to have their share of the additional inn services when a black and gray figure, coated in a shroud of red chakra, entered the main room of the building. The last Iwanin was frozen in place by the sheer pressure of the crimson cloak of energy and by the evil intent rolling off the newcomer. The girl, however, seemed completely oblivious to everything, still looking at nothing and not moving an inch from her position on the dirty floor of the room. Naruto had never been confronted to a situation like this before, but he could still guess what had happened. The eyes of the innkeeper's daughter were void of any spark that could indicate some sort of fight left in her. And the young Uzumaki, being who he was and following his nin, to never give up, with zealous fervor, was astonished and terrified to see someone as broken as this girl, and sensing the roller coaster of emotion she was feeling right now only added to that. And it made him only more furious. Before the rapist could react, Naruto punched him right in the face with Bijk-enhanced strength, sending him crashing through a wall in the backyard of the inn. But this ninja, contrary to the other two, was a jounin. And as such, he managed to recover just in time to avoid Naruto's beast wave palm by jumping high in the air before attempting to prepare a jutsu. Keyword attempting, as before he could start his series of hand signs, he was wrapped with his arms stuck against his chest by translucent ribbons. He took a look behind his back and saw that he had been caught by a flying woman wearing ceremonial robes and a kitsune mask, and that the ribbons he was tied with were connected to her arms. The woman swung her hands downwards, causing the trapped Iwanin to be propulsed towards the ground. As he violently landed, he could feel and hear several of his bones snap under the strength of the impact. Seeing his prey now immobilized, Naruto dispelled Tenyo, who he had summoned with hard-attained speed after seeing his target trying to keep his distance with him, and slowly walked towards the Iwanin, while profusely showering him with killing intent. The rapist was close to losing the control of his bladder. He could feel that the chakra coming from that boy was radiating evil, and the pressure of his power was suffocating. Adding the bloodthirsty look on his face and his maniacal grin didn't make it any easier for him to keep his pants clean before he died. At this point, he knew that he was screwed. "You're a demon," he managed to say before Naruto stopped in front of his broken body, hunched over to face him directly. Hearing this made something snap inside the Jinchuriki. For a long time, he had heard the whispers behind his back, the villagers being angry because of his pranks, ordering their children to stay away from him, calling him names. Punk, good for nothing, troublemaker, monster, and sometimes Jiraiya led Naruto towards a worn-out public bench, unaware of the discussion currently taking place inside the blonde's mind. I killed them, he thought, over and over again, but that was not what disgusted him the most, and I enjoyed it. He was a ninja, and as a ninja, he was expected to kill one day, either in order to defend himself or to eliminate a target assigned by his Hokage. But, truth be told, Naruto always had a sort of chivalrous view of the ninja world. Shinobi fighting in the open, face to face, to defend their home and protecting their precious people. Of course, it didn't help that he idolized the Yondaime Hokage, who was praised as a war hero, a most noble and generous soul, and a model for every aspiring shinobi. His perception had been disturbed for the first time during his mission in the Land of Waves. It was the first time that Naruto was confronted with the fact that shinobi were often perceived as tools, and that some of them accepted it without protesting. Of course, he had rejected this concept vehemently, but it still made him think. But now what he had seen in this inn had shook him to his core. Naruto may have grown up nicely as a shinobi, but he was still, deep down, an innocent boy. He had never been confronted to such a selfish and cruel act before. And his negative emotion sensing only made it worse. The unbridled lust of the Iwanin had horrified him. This is one of the many reasons why I hate humanity. Suddenly said Kurama. Your kind has many quirks, but one of the worst is your lust. Whether it is for flesh, money, or power, lust will always lead to hurt others in the way of what you crave. You just saw it. This girl is broken. This man used her as a way to satiate himself, and then he just discarded her. This Gaten person that you met during the mission where you first used my power, he brought a country to his knees just to make himself wealthier. Madara killed your parents and many more to capture me. Kurama's voice was filled with disgust, and it was the first time that he ever explained where the roots of his hatred came from to Naruto. And the blonde, who originally had thought that it originated from the fact that he had been sealed away, felt like he started to understand the fox, if only a bit. Humans are selfish. Nothing counts but their goals. And they rarely for what they got. They often want more. And it begins anew. You did good by killing those three. At least, they won't hurt anybody anymore. But I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have enjoyed it. I am human too. I shouldn't have enjoyed killing. Naruto screamed internally. Why not? You said it yourself, didn't you? You killed monsters, not humans. And I agree with you. The first and only human being I ever met was the Rikiden Sennin. He dreamed of peace and harmony. The rest of you are just warmongers, only after your own safety. After the Sage of the Six Paths died, wherever I went, I could feel hatred and anger. War was everywhere. You killed each other for petty quarrels. And even the peace brought by the Senju and Uchiha clans when they came with the hidden villages system was only based on the enslavement of me and my brethren. Kurama retorted. Naruto was trying to ignore what the fox was saying, but he had a point. He couldn't deny what he had just said. And he was starting to doubt. Was humanity truly that far gone? Were they all just monsters? Your kind calls us demon because we are gifted with incredible power and because we destroy everything we come across, while we are only defending our freedom, continued the bitch. But after everything I witnessed in my long life, I'd rather be a demon than a human. The blonde didn't have anything to respond, and even if he did, he wouldn't have been able to, as he was suddenly felt a light tap on his cheek. He looked up to meet the concerned eyes of his godfather. I don't know what the fox is telling you, Gaki, but you shouldn't listen to him. Jiraiya said. How did you know? You always have that funny look when you are talking to the Kikbi in your mind. And on top of that, you looked pretty distressed. The Toad Sage sat down next to his apprentice and put a comforting hand on his shoulder. You can talk to me, Naruto. Killing is never an easy thing to do. A pained and fearful expression formed on the Uzumaki's face. But it was. It was easy. I think I liked it. The Sannin shook his head. You weren't really yourself. When you use the Kikbi's chakra, you are always influenced by it, even if you keep control. Moving his hand, Jiraiya started to ruffle Naruto's hand. He had noticed that doing this always seemed to lift the boy's spirit. You did the right thing by defending these two women, Naruto. Sometimes, killing is all we have left when we need to defend someone. Besides, if it was one of your friends in there, would you regret what you did? Just thinking about it made the blonde sick and furious. Imagining Sakura, Hinata, Ino or Tenten like that, looking so broken, was enough to make Kurama's chakra starting to ooze out from his body. Yeah, that's what I thought. Said Jiraiya. You know Gaki, in the spur of the moment, killing might seem easy. Adrenaline can dull your feelings in the middle of a fight. But it's dealing with it after the act is done that can be hard. You're questioning yourself right now. It's normal. If you weren't then, I'd be worried. The young Uzumaki let his master's words sink in for a bit. It was comforting, but what Kurama said was still nagging at him. The fox, he said that humans are monsters, Naruto whispered, but Jiraiya still managed to hear it. He isn't entirely wrong. It is true that there are people who abuse their powers to hurt others like you just saw. The Sannin started, and it's those abused that stand out the most. And sometimes even I doubt that true peace will ever exist one day whenever I come across people like those Iwanin. This came as a shock to Naruto. Jiraiya of the Sannin, the Toad Sage Extraordinaire of Mount Mamboku, the super pervert and proud author of the Icha Icha series, could doubt. The sage noticed the surprise of his godson and chuckled lightly. Yeah, Gaki, sometimes I don't know if my dream will ever come true. But then, I remember what my sensei once told me. Okijiji. What did he told you? Naruto eagerly asked. His respect for the Sandaime might have dropped, but he still saw him as a grandfather. He told me what his own sensei, Senju Hashirama in person, told him before. That the reason why the atrocities men are capable of marks us so much is because we are used to the little goods of our everyday lives. The small gestures, even a simple good day when you meet someone, are much more numerous than the massacres or the violations. And you can't just judge a man when he fights, you also have to do it when he simply lives. The sage rubbed the back of his head sheepishly in a very Namikaze-like fashion. Well, he didn't exactly said it like that. It was more in the line of. The great manifestations of evil are few and far between, and yet they often make us forget about the small sparks of good in every man and woman's heart. Sensei always liked to talk like this. He was a poet after all. Shinobi-san, absorbed as they were in their conversation, neither Jiraiya nor Naruto sensed the innkeeper approach them. She was staring at the Uzumaki with a mixture of fright and awe. I wanted to thank you, Shinobi-san, she said hesitantly. Nobody stood up for us when the Iwanin started to. She couldn't finish, the memory of what happened to her daughter and what almost happened to her still fresh. And yet, you, a complete stranger, I can't thank you enough, Shinobi-san. You shouldn't be thanking me. Naruto responded. I wasn't able to stop that guy before he and I destroyed the back wall of your inn. And I will notice that one of their patrolling squad is missing. Even so, those men would have continued if you didn't kill them. But stop that, Gaki. You just saved this woman and prevented more harm to come to her daughter. And besides, accident often happens during patrols. It will be easy to mask this up and make it look like an encounter with shinobi from another neighboring country. Jiraiya admonished his apprentice. He then turned towards the innkeeper, who looked apprehensive under the gaze of the imposing Sannin. I understand that you might want to be left alone after what happened, but would it be too much to ask if there is 1 or 2 rooms available? And no, of course not, it is the least I can do. I will even let you stay free of. No, we will pay for our stay. I insist. The innkeeper nodded gratefully, whispering several thank you, before leaving the 2 Konoha shinobi in order to prepare their rooms. Jiraiya noticed that his student was still looking down. You shouldn't feel too bad, Naruto. I won't tell you that what you did was the right thing. Killing should never be considered right. You had to choose between 2 evils. And you chose the lesser one. And the sage's face turned grim for a second. If you hadn't been faster than me back there, I would have killed them myself. Naruto nodded, thankful that his master shared a bit of his wisdom with him. Even if he was a pervert and goofed around quite often, Jiraiya wasn't a living legend for nothing. In the end, the Uzumaki was more determined than ever to train and become strong enough to protect his precious people, but also those who couldn't do it themselves. If the cost for that was to take lives, then he would. He had been trained to do it. He was a shinobi. He would endure whatever was thrown at him, and his resolve would not falter. As the sun rose over Yama-no-Kuni, so did the Toad Sage and the Kikbijinch Kriki. They had decided during dinner to leave early. Thankfully, there were no other Iwanin in Yamatsuri, but they already had drawn too much attention to themselves. The small town was already miserable enough, and if they extended their stay, more Iwanin might come to investigate. As they were about to leave the inn, Naruto noticed the girl Kid, he remembered her name, was looking at him. He could still sense disgust coming from her. She would need time to recover from her aggression, and even then, the Uzumaki knew that she would have to live with this memory for the rest of her life. Neither Jiraiya nor Naruto had saw her during their stay. Her eyes seemed a bit brighter, but one could easily notice how they reflected the anguish their owner was feeling. Kid approached the 2 Konoha shinobi slowly and bowed deeply in front of them. She stayed silent, but no words were needed. Jiraiya only nodded before he went out. Naruto didn't move. He didn't speak either. He really didn't know what to say. The blonde wanted to say that it was nothing, but given the circumstances, it didn't feel right. He wanted to say that he was sorry for not arriving earlier, but he knew that going over what-if scenarios was not going to do Kid any good. So he opted to simply bow his head back, all the while smiling softly. She understood. Following his godfather outside, the blonde Uzumaki turned back one last time as they were getting out of Yamatsuri to wave in the direction of the small inn before facing the road. He didn't saw it, but he knew that Kid had waved back. They had only spent 12 hours or so in the small town in the mountains, and yet, for Naruto, it felt like 10 years. He also understood why Jiraiya wanted to take him on a trip rather than simply train him in Konoha. Experience as a shinobi came not only from training and battling, but also from meeting people and seeing the world with your own eyes, both in tragic and happy contexts. Unfortunately, their short stay in the land of mountains ended up as a shocking experience, and the image of Kid's lifeless eyes would probably haunt him for quite some time. Aki. Naruto shifted his gaze from the road to Jiraiya after hearing his call. We only have 1 year left before we go back to Konoha. You know what this means, right? The blonde chuckled. If the Toad Sage wanted to scare him, he would have to do better than that. Yeah, I know. More training. And you want to know how I respond to that? Bring it on, Iro-senin. Smirking, Jiraiya smacked Naruto's back. You better believe it'll bring it, Gaki. And the two of them continued to walk towards the rising sun, happy to be with each other on the road, excited for the intense sparring sessions that were to come, and impatient to eventually go back home. The sun was shining brightly over the hidden village of Konoha during this beautiful and peaceful summer day. A soft breeze was blowing, cooling the two shinobi on guard duty at the main gate of the village. Even though they were used to watch over the flow of people leaving and entering Konoha, Hagane Katetsu and Kamizuki Izumo were still bored out of their mind. Nothing really exciting had happened in Konoha in months since the end of the first stage of the last Chunin exams. And now the two ninja were just sitting there, struggling to keep themselves awake. Even Izumo, who usually was the most serious and the voice of reason of the duo, was considering a nap. It's not like anything was going to happen today, right? As if to answer his silent question, Katetsu nudged him, pointing towards the road. Hey Izumo, is that who I think it is? Looking at the direction his partner was indicating, Izumo noticed the two shinobi who were about to enter Konoha. One was easily identified as Jiraiya, and he could only guess that the other one was Naruto. Both guards were surprised at the blonde's appearance. Gone was the orange-wearing midget. In his place was a tall young man, wearing a black long-sleeved jacket, a burnt orange shirt. He finally managed to squeeze some orange in his outfit, as long as it wasn't as flashy as his old clothes, gray pants and black shinobi boots. His outfit was completed by a red short-sleeved coat decorated with a black flame pattern. Beside his new outfit, Izumo and Katetsu were surprised by how mature he looked. A single glance in his direction would tell you that this wasn't the loudmouth brat from 2.5 years ago. It was obvious he grew both as a man and a ninja. The two returning shinobi stepped through the gate, casually waving at the two Chunin, as if they only had been gone for a few days. Impatient to see his home, Naruto ran off, leaving a chuckling Jiraiya behind, and jumped high enough to land on a nearby pole. He was happy to be back. At first glance, nothing seemed to have really changed in Konoha. The damage inflicted during Oto and Suna conjoint invasion had been repaired, and the only other noticeable change was the fifth face carved in the Hokage monument. So they added B-chan's mug up there, huh? Said Naruto, smiling softly. Boy, Naruto. You know that we need to report to Tsunade Hime, right? Called Jiraiya from the street below. The blonde did not answer right away. Instead, he let his eyes linger for a moment on a particular place. The sage, noticing that his student looked deep in thought, followed his gaze. Finally understanding where Naruto was looking at, he sighed before waving at him. I'm Gaki, I'll go on ahead. Don't take too long, but say hi for me, alright? Thanks, Iro-senin. I will. The Uzumaki said, nodding gratefully at his godfather, before swiftly leaping back on the ground and sprinting off towards his destination. Looking at his retreating apprentice's back, Jiraiya couldn't help the feeling of pride bursting in his chest. Naruto was growing to be a splendid shinobi, just like his parents were. It was only a matter of time before the new generation surpassed the old one. Not wanting to get beaten up by an angry Tsunade for being late, Jiraiya made his way towards the Hokage Tower. The slug Sannin was probably eager to learn about Naruto's growth during their trip. Senju Tsunade, Godame Hokage of Konohagakure no Sado, was unusually excited today. She wasn't grumbling as much while dealing with the paperwork that her assistant and apprentice Shizune was regularly bringing to her. Her perverted teammate and her favorite knucklehead were due to arrive anytime soon now. She would never admit it, particularly to the two above-mentioned men, but she had really missed them. Both had a certain talent to get on her nerves, but things were a little too quiet for her taste when they weren't around. She knew that she would most likely give anything in a few weeks for a break after dealing with their antics, but right now she was impatient to see her old friend and his blonde apprentice. Tsunade Hime, even after 2 years, you are still as beautiful as ever. Said a familiar voice, coming from behind her. Turning her seat to face the intruder, Tsunade couldn't help but smile at seeing Jiraiya perched on the windowsill as usual when he came in her office. However, she started frowning at the glaring absence of a certain someone. Well, I'm happy to see you too, Jiraiya, but where is Naruto? She asked. He had something important to do before our meeting. She raised a brow at the sage's statement. More important than to report to his Hokage and say hello after 2.5 years on the road. A soft, nostalgic smile formed on Jiraiya's face. Yes, something very important to him. He said, looking down at the village. Something long overdue. Even though he knew most of the village quite well, it was the first time Naruto ever came here. It was not surprising, as the blonde never knew if he had any family before he left with his godfather. But ever since the night Kurama almost broke out of his seal, he had wanted to come here. And now that he was there, he felt a bit lost. He never had done that before, but he knew he had to. He wanted to. Slowly making his way between the tombstones, the blonde Uzumaki was looking for the grave of his mother. His father had been buried alongside the other Hokages, as per the tradition, and Jiraiya had asked him to keep his affiliation with Minato a secret for now. But he hadn't said anything about his mother. And, now that he knew who his parents were, Naruto wanted to give them his respects. His coat, a gift for his 15th birthday, was something the blonde considered as a tribute to the both of them. It was a way to still display his connection with his father, as Minato was known for wearing a white haori decorated with red flames during his reign as the Yondaime Hokage. Its red color was of a similar shade as Kushina's fiery hair, which Naruto had found really beautiful. Eventually, he found his mother's gravestone. He felt weird. He had met her in his mindscape, and even though she had only been a chakra imprint, she seemed so alive. He still remembered how it felt to be hugged. He had never felt so safe before, or so loved. And now, seeing her cold and silent grave, he couldn't help but feeling a dull ache in his chest. And yet, it was a proof that it was real, it wasn't a dream. He did have parents who loved him very much. Who sacrificed themselves so he could live. Kneeling, Naruto caressed the name engraved in the stone, fully reassuring himself that Uzumaki Kushina had indeed existed. "Hello mom. It's been a while, hasn't it?" he said softly. "I became pretty strong training with Iro Sennin, you know. And it's thanks to you and dad. The old fart put me through hell, but I wasn't about to give up. I have to make you proud. Believe it. Oh, before I forget, the pervert says hi, too." And with that, Naruto continued to talk about everything and nothing. How he was doing, a dream he had, the things he saw during the trip. Even though he was aware that his parents knew about his life, as they had read through his memories, he still talked about his childhood, how he skipped class, his pranks, his missions with Team 7. It just felt right to him. Other teenagers would have been ashamed to open themselves like that to their mother, but Naruto wasn't aware of that. And even if he was, he wouldn't care. Unbeknownst to him, the blonde had an eavesdropper. It just so happens that this beautiful summer day was a Thursday. And every Thursday, Hinata visited the grave of her late mother, Hitomi, who died in childbirth. She remembered it all too well. It was a Thursday, the day she lost her beloved mother, but gained her precious little sister Hanabi. And as such, every Thursday, Hinata deposed flowers on her mother's grave. Ever since she became a genin, she would do just that after her training session with her team, in the afternoon. At this time, the Konoha cemetery was usually quiet, and very often she would be the only living soul present between the tombstones. As she was on her way to visit her mother's grave, the brunette noticed that today, she would not be alone in the cemetery. There was a kneeled man, who was talking out loud to whoever he was paying his respects to. Hinata wasn't a nosy person, but seeing someone else here was kind of unusual. A closer look at this man informed her that he was in fact a teenager, probably no older than her. From her perspective, she couldn't see his face, but she could very well see his golden hair and his red coat. His voice was soft, and she could start making out some of the words. It was very rude of her to eavesdrop like that, but, as the distance between them grew smaller, his voice was becoming more and more familiar. "Really glad that I was able to meet you both. Sometimes, even though it's been more than 2 years now, I still ask myself if it was not a dream." Yes, Hinata definitely knew that voice. She was starting to blush furiously, like she hadn't since he left on his training trip. Could it be him? Was he really back? Any doubt she might have left were dissipated when the boy raised his head to look at the statue representing a flame at the far end of the cemetery. Whiskers marks. Check. Sun-kissed skin. Check. Cerulean eyes in which the brunette wished she could lose herself for hours on end. Check. Uzumaki Naruto was back in Konoha. It took everything Hinata had to keep herself from fainting. However, she wasn't able to keep a squeak out of her mouth. "You know, Kei-chan, I'm really glad that I was able to meet you both. Sometimes, even though it's been more than 2 years now, I still ask myself if it was not a dream." Raising his head to look at the sculpture of a crimson flame on the other side of the cemetery, Naruto closed his hand and put it over his heart. "I promise you both that I will protect the village with everything I have. I will use Kurama's power to bring peace, and I will stop Madara. Believe it." It was at this moment that the blonde Uzumaki heard a squeaking sound coming from somewhere behind him. Turning, he noticed that he was no longer the only visitor inside the cemetery. It took him only a few seconds to recognize the girl. Her pearly eyes, her pale skin, her flushed cheeks, her midnight blue hair. "Oh, Hinata. I didn't see you there. I was a bit caught in my thoughts." Naruto greeted the Hika girl sheepishly. Hello Naruto-kun." She stuttered softly, silently cursing herself. She had worked so hard on her shyness, and yet here she was, a flushing mess again. But she could not help it. Hinata was not someone to judge or appreciate a person by his looks alone. The fact that she was the only girl who didn't have a crush on Sasuke back at the academy was proof of that. But even so, she couldn't help but find Naruto's whiskers and blonde locks attractive. If somebody had asked her to describe him physically with one word, she would have answered cute if she hadn't fainted out of embarrassment. But right now, Hinata couldn't help but find the Uzumaki handsome. He had grown up a lot, way more than she did. His face was more mature, his hair longer, and, even though she did not dislike orange that much, she was glad that he was also wearing much more fashionable clothes. It might have been the blonde's unwavering spirit that drew her to him, but she was still very pleased by the Naruto's new appearance. He looked good. To put it simply, if Hinata was more outspoken or had been born as a Yamanaka, she would have called her crush sexy, but she had been raised as a proper lady, so she settled on handsome. Naruto too was taking in the brunette's new looks. Even though he was still relatively innocent, you did not spend 2.5 years with a super pervert without getting acquainted with a lot of scantily clad representative of the fairer sex. He also still had nightmares, often replayed by Kurama when the fox was frustrated after a training session that did not meet his expectations, of the time Jiraiya had given him the talk a few months ago. The Uzumaki would deny it fervently, but he too was a pervert. Not as much as his master, but still, he was the creator of the Warak no Jutsu, sexy technique, and Jiraiya might have bribed him for training if he sneaked in the women's section of the numerous bathhouses they stopped at and memorized the mensurations of the ladies there. All in all, the blonde was now way more appreciative of the feminine charms, even though not as much as his godfather, instead of being fixated only on the actress Fujikazuki, aka the princess of the land of spring, Kazuhana Koyuki. However, Naruto was not one to ogle his friend shamelessly like that. But he couldn't help but find Hinata pretty. Long hair definitely suited her, he decided. Her choice of clothes did not change much. They were still quite baggy, but of a more vivid color, now white and lavender instead of beige. He used to think of her as a dark and gloomy weirdo before actually getting to know the Haikyuu a little. She might be shy and have her share of insecurities, but she was a hard-working kunoichi and a selfless and gentle soul. And, in retrospect, Naruto liked weird people. He was a little weird himself, after all. Overall, she was someone he really appreciated. It's been a while. I'm happy to see you, Hinata. The blonde said, a toothy grin on his face. The brunette's blush intensified. She had really missed his smile. It's as good to see you too, and Naruto-kun. She responded softly. As the surprise of the blonde's return started to fade a bit, Hinata was starting to grow curious. She had often stalked him, coincidentally walked out of view or hidden behind trees 20 feet or so behind Naruto for a long time, and never once he had visited the cemetery. She knew he was an orphan, so the only deceased person he would ever visit here that she could think of would be the Sandaime, but usually, when people were mourning a Hokage, they were doing so in front of the flame sculpture, near the end of the graveyard. Their musings were cut short when Naruto spoke up. Oh. Since you're here, I should probably present you to each other. He then turned his gaze back to the grave he was standing next to. Mom, that's Hinata, one of my friends. And Hinata, this is my super awesome mom. The brunette was surprised to hear that Naruto was actually visiting his mother's grave. On the other hand, she was also happy that he discovered the identity of his parents. You discovered the identity of your parents, and Naruto-kun? She asked, astonished. He only answered with a happy and energetic nod. The brunette was honored that he would present her directly like that. Being an orphan, knowing his parents was obviously very important to him. Hinata took a look at the plaque, reading the name engraved on the stone, before bowing in front of the grave. Hello, Kushina-san. It is a pleasure to meet you. It might seem a bit silly to talk to a tomb like they were doing, but for the two teens, it was perfectly normal. Even though they were not amongst the living anymore, they knew that their mothers were looking over them from the pure world. She hesitated a bit, thinking that it was rude to ask, but she was curious. And is your father here, too? I mean, you're not forced to respond, maybe it's something that you do not want to talk about. Naruto tensed ever so slightly. He didn't like to lie to his friend, but Jiraiya had been clear. Oh, I don't know his name. I only learned who my mom was. Luckily, Hinata did not caught his lie, but she looked dejected nonetheless. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't be. Who knows, maybe he was someone famous. He retorted, trying to cheer up the girl next to him. That was not a lie, at least, and he managed to bring a small smile back on Hinata's face. They stayed silent in front of the grave for several minutes. Hinata couldn't help but take a quick look at Naruto's face every few seconds. His eyes fascinated her. Instead of the usual sparkle of mischief and resolve, they were filled with longing and warmth. Her blush intensified when the blonde caught her staring. He was intrigued as to why she was looking at him so intently, but kept his curiosity to himself and rather decided to catch up with the brunette. So, how have you been, Hinata? He inquired with his trademark grin. I have been good, thank you for asking. I trained a lot with Niji-nai-san, and I recently became Chunin. The brunette answered, still too shy to look more than a few seconds at the blonde's smiling face. And you, how did your trip with Jiraiya-sama went? When did you come back? Oh, we arrived, like maybe an hour ago. You're actually the first person besides those two guys at the gate that I've met. As for the trip, it was pretty cool for the most part, he said, his smile and eyes dimming a bit. He shook it off quickly before worrying Hinata. I learned a lot with Hiro Sennin, not just shinobi stuff. I'm sure you are really strong now. The Haiku girl murmured. Taking another glance at her love interest's face, she noticed that his smile was not as wide as it used to be, and yet it felt more genuine. Now that she had noticed that, everything about him felt like this. She knew, of course, of the mask that he put to hide his pain from the world. And now that it was gone, even if only partially, Hinata could see that Naruto looked older than he really was. Her analysis came to a stop when she heard the blonde's voice. He had noticed the flowers that the brunette had with her. Are you visiting someone too? Oh, sorry, maybe I shouldn't ask. Don't worry, and Naruto-kun. I'm coming for my mother too, actually. She looked up hesitantly at the blonde's face, her stutter getting stronger. Maybe, if why you don't mind, I see could introduce why you, T2. Naruto had presented her, it was only natural that she did the same. You sure? I don't want to bother you or anything. The blonde said hesitantly. And no, you would never be a bother to me, Naruto-kun. Hinata assured him. I usually come here alone, or with my sister. But, it would be nice if you were here T2, I never introduced a friend to my mother before. Oh, I would be honored, then. The Uzumaki said happily. Smiling softly at his response, Hinata went on her way towards her mother's grave, Naruto following close behind her. After a short walk, the two teens stopped in front of another grave, obviously more visited than Kushina's, as the flowers that framed it indicated. Naruto suddenly felt really dumb. He had completely forgot to buy something to bring to his mother. Posing half of the bouquet on the grave, Hinata then knelt in front of it and joined her hand in a sort of prayer before speaking. Hello mother. I did not come alone today. This is one of my closest friends, Uzumaki Naruto-kun. He just came back from a long journey. The blonde was a bit surprised but flattered to be qualified as a close friend by Hinata. He had to admit that she was the sweetest person he knew. He bowed politely in front of the stone, like Hinata did before. Hello, Hitomi-sama. It is a pleasure to know you. It was something else that Jiraiya had taught him. Manners. It still did not come naturally, but Naruto knew when he had to show them, at least. Hinata was from a noble clan, so it was normal to be as civil as he could. He stood by while Hinata talked about her day, like he did before with his mother, not making a sound. As the brunette finished and said goodbye to the tombstone, they started walking again, this time to leave the cemetery. As they passed in front of Kushina's grave on their way out, Naruto took one last glance, cursing himself again for forgetting to bring a little something, at least. Noticing her crush looking away and following his gaze, Hinata guessed what he was thinking. Shyly tucking at his sleeve to catch his attention, she offered him the flowers she had left. Why, you can offer your mother these if you want to, Naruto-kun. I bought them so I could press them later, but this is more important. Really? She nodded, not trusting her ability to talk after seeing his blinding smile. Thanks Hinata. You're really awesome. Graciously accepting the flowers, the blonde went back to kneel in front of the plaque bearing his mother's name and deposed a bouquet before doing a prayer like he saw Hinata do earlier. I'll come back some other time, mom. Maybe with Hiro Sennin. He said before standing up and falling back into steps with the Haiku girl. The brunette was very happy right now. Naruto was back and she was the first of their former classmates to meet with him since he returned and she had managed to hold a discussion with him without embarrassing herself. As they climbed down the stairs leading to the cemetery, idly chatting, Naruto suddenly remembered that he was supposed to meet with Tsunade and that his visit had taken longer than what he had originally planned. Oh shit. I should go and see B-chan before she comes after me. I'll see you around, Hinata. It was cool to see you. He said loudly. Same here Naruto-kun. See you soon. The brunette answered in a gentle voice. After she and her favorite blonde parted ways, Hinata finally allowed an excited squeal to escape her mouth before fainting in the middle of the street. Naruto, though he originally planned to hurry towards the Hokage Tower after leaving Hinata, decided to, instead, take a tranquil stroll in the streets of Konoha. Tsunade could wait a bit more, right? Besides, it's been years since he could just walk around the village like that. His first thought was to go to Ichiraku, but he quickly dismissed it. He didn't want to be that late, after all. It was definitely his first stop after his meeting with the Hokage, though. The blonde was broken out of his thoughts when he noticed a flash of pink in the crowd of villagers. Making his way through the people in the street, he finally managed to find his teammate. Hey, Sakura-chan. Said girl turned around, hearing her name being called. Naruto. Is that really you? Though she was not as appreciative towards the blonde new appearance as Hinata had been, the pinkette still had to admit that he definitely looked more mature and serious. His posture denoted the same thing. Sakura's outfit too showed that she had taken her training seriously. While similar to her genin's attire in color, it was much more fitted for shinobi duty. Her sleeveless red shirt showed her well-toned arms, and Naruto could guess that his teammate had inherited Tsunade's legendary strength. Overall, she looked like a true kunoichi, while still being her old dashing self in the blonde's eyes. "Yep. That's me. Do I get a hug or something?" he asked jokingly, opening his arms like he wanted to embrace his teammate. "You wish." Sakura answered playfully. "So, when did you arrive, Naruto? I think I saw Jiraiya-sama earlier, but you were not with him." "Yeah, I had something to do before meeting with B-chan," he said, his voice becoming a bit softer. "Really? Something more important than a briefing with the Hokage? Don't tell me you stuffed yourself silly with ramen or I was visiting my mom's grave." Whatever Sakura was about to say died in her throat upon hearing that. "Why your mom's grave? But I thought you were an orphan," she said loudly. "Well, I still have to come from somewhere, you know," Naruto retorted, slightly annoyed. She flinched a bit at his response. She hadn't meant to sound so harsh. "I'm sorry, Naruto. It's just I didn't expect you to say something like that. I'm really happy that you discovered your mother's identity, though. I'm so sorry since she's..." Waving dismissively to indicate that it was no big deal, Naruto quickly reassured her. "Hey, don't worry, Sakura-chan." Even Hinata sounded surprised. "You've met Hinata already?" The blonde nodded. "Yep, she was visiting her mother too. I was a bit surprised when I saw her. She has changed quite a bit." Sakura quirked an eyebrow, surprised that Naruto had actually noticed Ahika's growth. It was not a secret that she had trained a lot during the past 2 years in order to impress the Uzumaki. Sakura herself had helped her, along with Ino, to improve her self-confidence. They even tried to get her to wear more revealing clothes, but the brunette refused, still too shy to show as much skin as the Amanaka did. "You're right," Sakura agreed, "but she is not the only one, you know. Don't you think I look more professional, or perhaps womanly to you?" Taking another glance at his teammate, Naruto thought carefully of his answer. Jiraiya had told him something about women in compliment, but it was kind of hazy. He had been more focused on training with Kurama's chakra at the time. "You look great, Sakura-chan," he said, a bit hesitant. Hopefully, his answer would please the pinkette. He was relieved when he noticed the small blush on the pinkette's cheeks. "Thank you, Naruto. You look pretty good yourself." "Finally dumped the jumpsuit, huh? Man, what was wrong with my jumpsuit? It was so awesome, so orange, so awesomely orange," he exclaimed dramatically. Truly his fashion sense wasn't that bad, was it? Before Sakura could say something, a high-pitched shout, coming from a spiky brown-haired boy wearing a long blue scarf, rang in the crowded street, startling the villagers around. "Naruto Naichin." Recognizing the boy immediately, a huge grin formed on the Jinchuriki's face. "Konohamaru. How you been, boss?" This time, it was a girl with orange hair tied up into 2 pigtails and a brown-haired boy wearing glasses and with a permanent drip of snot coming out of his nose that spoke up as they appeared behind the young Sarutobi. "Oh. Mogi and Yuden." It was then that Naruto noticed the shiny Hittite on their forehead. "And you 3 are genin now? Are you on the same team?" "You bet, Nai-chan. And our team leader is Ibisu-sensei," Konohamaru claimed proudly. The self-appointed apprentice of the blonde Uzumaki abruptly took on a determined expression, pointing towards his rival for the title of Hokage. "I'm way stronger than I was 2 years ago, boss. The jutsu you taught me, I have fully mastered it. And I'll show you right now." Without wasting time, the Sarutobi made the ram sign before shouting, "Sexy technique." The young and noisy boy vanished, instantly replaced by a beautiful woman, completely naked, with only a few clouds of mist covering her most private areas and showing off her curve in a koi pose while flashing Naruto a sultry smile. The jutsu did not leave the rest of the group unaffected. Yuden's face turned beet red, while Mogi and Sakura both looked to be profoundly indignant at the shameless display of flesh. The only reaction that seemed out was that of Naruto. He did not look flustered, angry or proud. He was only smiling softly, like a teacher would do after witnessing a student trying to resolve a difficult exercise he had been working on for a long time. This did not come unnoticed by Sakura, who was staring in awe at her teammate. "Wow, no perverted remarks, no blush, he really has a countenance now. He really did mature, it's not just an act," she thought, happy and somewhat relieved to witness Naruto's growth for herself. Konohamaru dispelled his jutsu, looking to be disappointed. He had hoped to impress his rival and model, but it looked like it didn't affect him at all. "You know, Konohamaru," Naruto started, "you shouldn't use such a childish jutsu anymore." The Uzumaki put his hands on his unofficial pupils, prompting the boy to raise his head to meet the eyes of his idol. "Showing off everything like that is pointless. The true way to hypnotize your target with your sex appeal is, instead, to tease. Showing off just a bit while concealing the rest. Make him want to see more. Make him squirm. Make him wonder. His mind will be in turmoil, he'll be too focused on trying to divine. The vein was pulsating dangerously on Sakura's forehead, her fists were clenched, and a dark aura was starting to form around her. Had Naruto not been so caught up in his lesson on how to use the feminine charms to one's advantage, he would have noticed it. But you're my ass. He is still the same perverted idiot. Cha. Years of training under Tsunade made Sakura an expert in medical ninjutsu. Her excellent chakra control had allowed her to pick it up very quickly, and she rapidly became an expert in the art of healing. However, the Slug Princess was also known for her monstrous strength, and the pink cat had learned to use quite well. And she was just about to show her teammate how well. Cocking her fist back, she swiftly launched to try it at his face. Sakura not only trained her strength, but her speed as well. It was no use to be able to destroy walls in one punch if you couldn't even brush your enemy. Fully expecting to feel the satisfying sensation of her fist hitting flesh and skull, the Haruno had already set her eyes on the spot she guessed Naruto would land after her punch would introduce him to the clouds. She was surprised to hit nothing but air. Turning her gaze to the spot where Naruto had been, she constated that indeed, he wasn't there anymore. He was standing behind her, his features showing that he was surprised, yet impressed by the fact that his friend had almost pounded him into oblivion. Wow, Sakura-chan, that was close. I could feel the chakra concentrated in your fist, and let me tell you, I wouldn't have liked getting hit by that. The blonde said, chuckling nervously. The medic was amazed. She had spared quite a few times against Lee in order to improve her jutsu. She was proud of how much she had progressed in this area, as it made her incredible strength all the more effective. In their most recent bout, she had been pleased to note that, while the spandex-wearing shinobi was still too fast for her to hit, it took him way more effort to dodge her punches. And just now, Naruto had not only easily dodged her attack, but he had also managed to get behind her in an ideal position to swiftly finish her if he so wished. And all of that without her even sensing the blonde's movement. Naruto was really fast. And, if the awestruck faces that the Konohamaru Corps were making was any indication, they had witnessed it too and were as much, if not more impressed than Sakura at their model speed. Boss. That was so cool. Teach that to us. Demanded the Sandame's grandson. Sorry, Konohamaru, but I gotta go. Tsunade-chan is waiting for me. Said Naruto while playfully ruffling the Sarutobi's hair, making the boy pout childishly. Alright, but you'll definitely train us some other time. The Uzumaki nodded. It's a deal, squirt. The Konohamaru Corps then took off, as they apparently were in the middle of a D-rank mission, after bidding goodbye to the two older ninja. Naruto and Sakura then resumed their walk towards the Hokage Tower, exchanging stories and anecdotes on their training under the two loyal Sannin. Finally. You really took your sweet time, Gaki. Tsunade may have been annoyed by Naruto's lateness, but it was easy to see that she was happy to see him nonetheless. The blonde in question had her arms crossed over her impressive chest in what was supposed to appear as a stern position, but the effect was ruined by the soft smile on her face. The Uzumaki looked a bit sheepish and immediately bowed in front of his Hokage. I am deeply sorry, Tsunade-sama. I will abide by whatever punishment you see fit for my lateness. The Godime's eyes nearly popped out of their orbits and her jaw almost hit the floor. She took a side glance at Jiraiya, who had an emotionless expression on, before looking back at Naruto, who was standing up in front of her with the same face as his master. Jiraiya told me that the Gaki had matured, but this is too much. Tsunade then noticed that the corners of the two spiky-haired shinobi were twitching ever so slightly. They exchanged a brief look before looking at the slug-san and gobsmacked expression. The twitching intensified. Jiraiya couldn't keep a snort from escaping his throat, and that broke the dam. The Toad Sage and his apprentice exploded in laughter. Tsunade-chan, your face. It was priceless. Naruto managed to say, still laughing. It was Tsunade's turn to explode. You little shit. I haven't seen you in 2 years, and not only are you fucking late, but you also made me believe for a second that this pervert taught you some manners. And stop calling me that. Sorry, B-chan, but it was too tempting. It's been a long time since I've done a prank. The Uzumaki apologized, his laughter having died down. Tsunade glanced accusingly at her teammate, who was still smiling like an idiot. Mature, my ass. At least I hope he is as strong as you said he was, Jiraiya. Do not worry about that, Haim. Naruto is fully capable of defending himself. Retorted the Toad Sage. We'll see about that, she said, still suspicious. Turning back to face the young Jinchuriki, Tsunade couldn't prevent a smile from coming back on her lips. Pranks aside, it's good to have you back, Naruto. This simple sentence made the blonde Uzumaki smile larger. His old fear of being alone, never being needed or acknowledged, wasn't as strong as before, but it was still there. Hearing one of the people he considered family say that having him back made them happy truly touched him. Yeah, it's good to be home. Tsunade's eyes, still on Naruto, briefly shined with warm affection, an emotion that she felt for all her shinobi, even more so towards the young blonde, but that she couldn't always afford to show as Hokage. As the leader of one of the most powerful military organization in the world, she couldn't let her enemies, both outside and inside the walls of Konoha, think of her as too soft to rule the village. But right there, she allowed it to surface, if only for a second, to show her self-appointed grandson that she was glad to see him again. However, they still had much to discuss. She clapped her hand to get back into her Hokage persona, and her business facade was up once again. Alright. Jiraiya already gave me a somewhat detailed report since you took your time to come here. I am aware of the accident, she said carefully, eyeing her second apprentice. Sakura hadn't said anything since she had entered Tsunade's office with Naruto, as the Pinket knew that the two had a close relationship and didn't want to interrupt them. And of everything we learned from it, as well as your special condition with our newest friend. She intently gazed at Naruto's stomach after this statement. Well, if Hiro-sennin already debriefed you, I don't have much to add. I am not very good with reports, you know. Said the Uzumaki. We still have some things to discuss. First off, I want to see your progress for myself. And I also would like to see how far Sakura's training has taken her. Retorted the Godame. And there is no better way to do that than a fight. Wait, so you will make me fight Sakura-chan? Hollered Naruto. Sakura stayed silent, but it was clear that she did not like the idea. Tsunade grinned. Nope. You will fight together against one of our strongest shinobi. He should have been here already, but it seems that he is even more late than you. Even more late? You mean? The slug-sannin nodded, but before she could confirm Naruto's suspicions, a new voice came from the opened window behind Jiraiya. Ma, it seems that you took after me more than I thought, Naruto. Grinning, the blonde flickered outside, surprising the two medics before reappearing in front of a familiar silver-haired shinobi, casually reading an erotic book right next to the Hokage's office window. Yo. He greeted nonchalantly, his one visible eye lazily shifting from his precious novel to his student. Kakashi-sensei, it's been a while. Said Naruto excitedly. The Chunin nodded before he noticed the blonde's new outfit. Well, you certainly look like him now. My rugged good looks have to come from somewhere, you know. The blonde retorted. Kakashi's eye widened before it turned into the infamous upturned U, indicating that the copy ninja was smiling under his mask. So, you know. Naruto nodded. The Jonin sighed, his lazy expression slipping, revealing a bit of the regrets Kakashi was burdening himself with. I should probably apologize, then. I was his student and I knew about. Don't, sensei. Interrupted Naruto. I know I was kept in the dark for my safety. And the past is the past. I won't forget, but I can forgive. We both know what happens if somebody isn't able to move on. Even though the Chunin knew his pupil was talking about Sasuke, he couldn't help but feel concerned too. His grief after his own teammate's death had led him to the harsh life of an Anbu operator. More than his life, it was his humanity that he almost lost, and it was only when the Sandame forcefully removed him and assigned him the role of Chunin sensei that Kakashi had regained some light in his life. You have grown, Naruto. The silver-haired shinobi said. I'm proud. And I also know that he is proud. And I'm grateful, too, that you don't hold anything against me. The blonde Jinchuriki looked a bit embarrassed as he rubbed the back of his head before he retorted, well, I'm still going to kick your ass, Kakashi-sensei. Believe it. The copy ninja eye smiled back. We'll see about that. They made their way back into the Hokage's office where Kakashi was greeted enthusiastically by Sakura before Tsunade resumed where she had left off before the Chunin's arrival. As I was saying, Sakura and you, Naruto, will fight against Kakashi so I can assess your skill. After that, you three will be back together as a team. Naruto cheered and Sakura was beaming. Even though their Uchiha comrade was still missing, the fact that Team 7 would be back on track soon was the first step to going back to the good old days. Your test will take place tomorrow morning at Training Ground 7. Tsunade continued. Me, Jiraiya and Shizune will observe you both. Hold on, B-chan. Could it be possible that the rest of our classmates and Team Guy assist the fight too? Naruto asked. The Hokage frowned. Why? You want to show off to your friends. This is about evaluating you, Gaki. Not for you to brag in front of everyone. I know. But it's very important. Naruto, so soon? I thought you wanted to wait for a bit before. Yes, Hiro-sennin, said the blonde, looking at his godfather with a determined expression. Turning back to Tsunade, his determination not faltering, he placed a hand on his stomach. I want to tell them. Tsunade's eyes almost popped out again. Are you sure? I know it is a sensitive subject to you, but yes, I'm sure. Soon enough, I'll have to fight the Akatsuki. I know that I can't do it alone. I will need my friends by my side. And I won't let them fight without knowing why they are truly risking their lives, so that's why I'd like them to be here tomorrow. I want to show them that I am in control. And having you, Hiro-sennin and Kakashi-sensei around would make it easier. The Godame knew that he wouldn't budge. He was in Uzumaki, and the Uzumaki were the most stubborn, hot-headed people you would ever meet. His reasons were noble, too. Naruto did not want his friends to fight for him without knowing about his tenant. And sooner or later, his Jinchuriki status would be known. Now that he had a certain amount of control over the Kyuubi's power, he was bound to use it. It was better that Naruto informed his comrades himself. Fine, I'll send a word to Kurenai, Asuma and Guy. Naruto's smile returned. Thanks, B-chan. He sensed his teammate confusion, and sure enough, Sakura looked perplexed. I'll explain everything tomorrow, Sakura-chan. I'd rather do it only once. The door of the office suddenly opened, revealing a dark-haired kunoichi, wearing a simple black and white kimono, who was carrying a stack of paper. Following behind her was a pig, wearing a pearl collar and a dark red jacket. Tsunade-sama, I've found what you wanted. She then noticed the other person present in the room, particularly the whiskered blonde. Naruto-kun. You've finally arrived. Shizune-chan. The Uzumaki greeted happily. Great. That was the second thing I wanted to talk about with you, Naruto. Tsunade sat on her chair, taking a document out of the stack brought in by Shizune and placed it on her desk so the Uzumaki could read it. What you are reading now is an account of the possession of one Uzumaki Kushina. Besides the more mundane items, it includes several sealing scrolls, a sword, and a good amount of money, worth several years of a Chunin salary. And now, it's yours. Awestruck, Naruto was looking at the paper like it was some sort of relic. It's my. Tsunade nodded. Yes, this is your inheritance. A lone tear made its way down the blonde's cheek. It was one thing to know that you had parents when you were an orphan, it was another to actually have something that linked you to them physically beside your blood. Thank you Tsunade-chan, Shizune-chan, thank you so much. To see Naruto in such an emotional state was a rare sight. Tsunade had to refrain from standing up and hug the blonde. Shizune had no such qualms. Even Taunton nudged the Uzumaki's feet affectionately. Sakura, Kakashi and Jiraiya settled for a comforting hand on his shoulder or his back. Oh, and I have something for you too, the Toad Sage spoke up, earning a curious and eager look from his apprentice. Well, it's more like a proposition. I know that you have your own apartment, but I have my own too, and it's pretty big. Way too big for me, actually. You already had to put up with me for the last 2 years and a half, but if you want, you could move in with me. Naruto was really starting to think that he was dreaming. First, he was offered his late mother's belongings, and now, somebody wanted him to live with them. I would love to, Iro-senin. Jiraiya grinned and ruffled his godson's hair. Finally, he could make things right with Naruto, like it should have been since the beginning. He hoped that Minato would forgive him in the afterlife, and that Kushina would give him a head start before trying to neuter him. Tsunade couldn't help the smile that formed on her face. If somebody truly deserved to be happy and to have a family, it was Naruto. And she was glad to be part of this family. Even if it meant being a grandmother. But there was no way in hell that she would ever admit it. Alright. She said, clapping her hand again to catch the attention of the people present in her office. You're free to go, Naruto. You have the rest of the day to do whatever you want. But I want you at 8 sharp at the training ground. Got it. The blonde nodded and gave her a thumbs up. The Hokage then turned her eyes on the copy ninja. And you as well, Kakashi. 8 AM. Sharp. Or I swear I'll make you eat your mask. Is that clear? The silver-haired ninja gulped before nodding as well. Good, then you are all dismissed. And Naruto, do not worry about Kushina's stuff. I'll have it delivered at Jiraiya's later today. Awesome. Thanks, B-chan. He shouted before he jumped on the windowsill and then on the nearest roof. And now, to Ichiraku. Both San and Sweat dropped. You didn't even told him where your apartment was. Jiraiya sighed before chuckling. Oh, don't worry about that. It's comforting to see that, despite his growth, Naruto can still be a child sometimes. He knows that he won't have much time for that in the future. He just wants to make the most of the little of his childhood he has left before becoming an adult. Tsunade silently agreed, but her concern was still obvious. Will he be alright? Oh, I think he will. He has his friends. And he has the Kyuubi. If I learned one thing about the fox during this trip, it's that he hates Madara more than he hates Naruto. As long as it stays like that, I'm not worried about Argaki. He learned just as much from the Bijk as he did from me. That's good to know, she murmured because I have a nagging feeling that things are about to go south pretty soon. Amik. Grandma showdown. Unbeknownst to both Naruto and Hinata, there were 2 other people with them in the cemetery. Well, they used to be people. Now they were spirits. The spirits of Uzumaki Kushina and Haika Hitomi, to be precise. And they were squealing like schoolgirls, watching their children talk. They are so cute together. Said Hitomi excitedly. I know, right? Too bad, we will never be able to play matchmaker and spoil our future grandchildren. Pouted Kushina. Tell me about it. They would have adored me. The Redeed arched a brow. Huh. They would have adored me. I mean come on, we Uzumaki know how to have fun, you know. Not like your stuck-up clan of tight asses. Excuse me. I know how to have fun. It's the elders who have sticks up their behind. Meh. You would have scared them with your freaky eyes. And you with your ugly hair, tomato. A murderous glint appeared in Kushina's eyes. What did you say? Tomato. 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 Shouted Hitomi, giddy to see her old friend fuming. You wanna go at it? You wanna freaking go at it? That's what you want. I would be a super awesome grandma. Believe it. Ah. They would get fat with all that stinky ramen you ate. And with that, the two ghosts and grandmothers hopeful brawled on their own graves while their children were leaving the cemetery, happily chatting with each other. What if Naruto Kurama mode Chunin exams NaruHina? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.